Story 1. I showed up to the holiday brunch with my kids. Dad whispered, "We were hoping to keep today peaceful. Why are you even here?" My daughter asked me, "Do you want to go?" I said, "Yeah, we're leaving." An hour later, my dad realized exactly what he just lost. I wasn't even supposed to be there. That's what Dad said. Anyway, not to my face, of course. He waited until I was standing right there, holding my daughter's coat, when he leaned in and muttered it like I'd crashed a funeral. "We were hoping to keep today peaceful. Why are you even here?" It was so matter-of-fact, like I'd forgotten my place and this was just a correction. The table went quiet for a second, but no one said anything. My mother pretended not to hear, busying herself with unfolding a napkin. My sister, Monica, glanced at her phone. No one made eye contact. It wasn't even 9 minutes into the brunch. Ava looked up at me, her voice calm. "Do you want to go?" "Yeah, we're leaving." We hadn't even sat down yet. My heels hadn't even stopped clicking on the floor. And just like that, we turned around and left. No dramatic scene. No yelling. Just a silence that felt heavier than anything I could have said. I drove in silence for a while until Ava said, "You tried. That's more than they deserved." It hit me harder than I expected. He was right. And not just about today. I had been trying for years, trying to make peace, to repair, to be the one who showed up even when I wasn't wanted. I thought if I just kept showing up, maybe they'd remember I was family too. That Ava was their granddaughter, that I was their daughter, but they never did. And I realized something in that drive home. I was the only one who ever tried. I took the blame. I paid the bills when Monica couldn't make rent. I picked up the phone when my mom called me crying about how hard things have been with your dad lately. And I showed up to every fake family event just to be told I was too much or not enough, depending on their mood. I didn't say anything right away. I just went home and made us pancakes. Ava played music and told me about a math test she didn't study for but somehow still aced. Life kept moving. But in the background of my mind, something new had started ticking. Not just anger, precision. I checked the date. Monica's rent was due the next morning. Every month for the past 8 months, I'd been quietly transferring $1,300 into her account, telling myself she'd pay me back, that it was temporary, that she was family. I told myself a lot of things. But that afternoon, I pulled up our text thread, scrolled to the part where she begged for help last spring. I took a screenshot, then another of the transfer receipts. Then I opened a new message to our parents. Nothing dramatic, just a note. "Since I wasn't supposed to be at brunch, I assume I'm not supposed to keep covering Monica's rent either. That ends tomorrow. Thought you should know." I hit send. 5 minutes later, Monica called me. I didn't answer. Then she texted 3 times in a row. "Wait, what happened? Did Dad say something again? Can we talk?" I didn't respond. It wasn't her I was punishing. It was them. And even though Monica had always been their favorite, it wasn't her fault she played the game better than I ever could. But I was done carrying responsibility that belonged to them. That night, around 11:30, I got another text. This time from my mom. "We can talk tomorrow. Don't do anything drastic." Too late. By the next evening, Monica was calling me again. Only this time from a different number. I answered mostly out of curiosity. "They're making me pack." "What?" "They're making me move in with them." Couldn't help it. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the way everything had aligned without me lifting another finger. I just made a choice and gravity did the rest. But this wasn't even the worst of it yet. That was still coming. Monica lasted exactly 3 days at our parents' house before she broke. On the 4th morning, I woke up to a dozen messages from her. Missed calls. A voice note that was 6 minutes long. I didn't even play it. I knew the tone. Confused, overwhelmed, starting to realize that the golden ticket she'd been handed her whole life wasn't actually good for anything. By noon, she texted again. No voice note this time, just words. "I get it now." That was it. No context needed. I stared at the screen for a while before locking it again and going back to my coffee. It wasn't that I didn't care. It was that I cared too much for too long. And now I had nothing left. This wasn't a performance. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even satisfied. I just felt done. What I didn't expect was how fast things would start unraveling. That afternoon, Ava came home with a confused look. She held up her phone and said, "Grandma just liked my birthday post from 3 days ago." I checked mine. No likes, no message, nothing. Not even a lazy, "happy birthday, sweetheart" text that would have taken them 6 seconds. It was deliberate, like they were trying to prove some kind of point. That I'd removed myself from the family, so they were going to treat Ava like she had to. "Do you think they'll come?" she asked. "Do you care?" I paused. Then I said, "Not anymore." We had a quiet dinner planned. Just a few of Ava's friends, pizza, a cake she picked out herself, and a movie. I'd invited Monica, half expecting her not to show, but she did. 20 minutes late. Hair a mess, sweatshirt inside out, holding a small box and a bottle of wine. She hugged Ava tight and stayed by her side the whole evening, talking to her friends, helping with the cake like she'd been part of our world the whole time. She didn't mention our parents. Not until she was leaving. "Can we talk for a second?" We stepped outside. She looked different, not just tired, stripped, like something had been peeled away. It's worse than I thought. Mom's constantly performing sadness like she's in some Lifetime movie. Dad walks around like a warden. He actually lectured me on how help can ruin people. I made pasta last night and he told me not to cook his garlic. His garlic. I didn't say anything, just listened. She ran her hands through her hair and sighed. "They said you were just looking for attention, that you always want to be the victim, that you brought all this on yourself." But then she looked up at me. "I told them they're wrong. You're not trying to punish anyone. You're just refusing to keep pretending. And they hate that more than anything." I didn't hug her, didn't cry, just nodded because that's exactly what it was. Not revenge, not cruelty, just refusal. And that was enough to shake their world. She left around 10 o'clock. The next morning I got a message. "I'm giving them a choice. Either they apologize to you and Ava, or I'm moving Dylan in." I had to read it twice. Dylan, the guy with sleeve tattoos, a lifted truck, and a chain wallet. He smoked inside and once brought a lizard to Thanksgiving. Dad hated him on sight. Mom called him intense in that whispery tone she uses when she's trying not to sound judgmental but absolutely is. I didn't tell Monica to do that. Never even hinted. But there it was. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't just my line in the sand. Monica had reached hers, too. After years of defending them, of pretending the dysfunction was normal. She had finally seen it, lived in it, and it made her choose a side. Not mine, just not theirs. And that made all the difference. 3 days later, my mom called. I let it ring. Then the voicemail came through. "Barbara, your sister has been incredibly disrespectful. I'm not sure what you've said to her, but this is getting out of hand. Maybe we could all sit down for Ava's sake." I didn't respond. I didn't need to because I knew what was coming next. And it wasn't peace. The voicemail just sat there. I listened once and let it rot in my inbox. It was exactly what I expected. A watered-down attempt at control wrapped in faux concern. I didn't return the call. I didn't need to. If they wanted me to feel guilty for stepping away, they were going to have to do better than a voicemail with zero accountability. But Monica kept the pressure on. By midweek, she was basically living in that house like a quiet hostage. She'd stopped asking if I was okay and started updating me with short, clip texts. "Dad slammed the door today. Mom cried over the laundry. They keep asking if I've talked to you yet." On Friday, she called me from her car while parked down the street. So I said it. Said what? I gave them a deadline. Either they apologize, really apologize, or Dylan's moving in on Tuesday with his drums and his turtle and his gaming setup. I laughed loud. Dylan's turtle. She was dead serious. And I told them if I so much as smell disapproval, he's not just visiting, he's staying. I even said he's starting to look into recording music in the basement. That wasn't a threat. That was warfare. Saturday morning, Ava walked into the living room with her phone in one hand and a half-eaten apple in the other. "Grandpa called me." "What?" "He left a voicemail. Want to hear it?" She pressed play. His voice had that rehearsed calm that came off like someone reading an apology off a napkin. "Hi. Ava. It's Grandpa. Just wanted to say sorry we couldn't be there for your birthday. We were dealing with a few things, but we'd like to come by. Maybe clear the air a little. Do you? That was it. No warmth, no accountability. Just the kind of message someone leaves when they're not sorry, just inconvenienced. Ava looked at me. Should I call him back? I shook my head. He didn't call to talk. He called to check a box. 2 hours later, Mom called me. I let it go to voicemail. This one was longer. Her voice had that distant, patient quality like she was reading from a script they both rehearsed. Barbara, things are escalating and your sister's being unreasonable. We're trying to find a solution, but you've made it quite hard. I think it would be good for everyone, especially Ava, if we found a way to move forward. Please consider that. No apology, just more vague pressure dressed up as concern. Not a single acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just a plea to go back to the way things were because now it was uncomfortable. Now it was public. Now Monica was forcing their hand. And I wasn't even doing anything. Sunday morning, Monica texted. They agreed. They're coming. I told them they have one shot. And if they mess this up, I'm not stopping Dylan. I didn't reply, but I waited. At 4:30 p.m. sharp, their car pulled up in front of my house. Mom was wearing pearls like she always did when she needed to look like a victim. Dad had on one of those golf polos he only wore to family dinners or funerals. Ava and I watched them through the window. I didn't get up to open the door. I let them knock. When we finally stepped out onto the porch, the four of us stood there like awkward neighbors. Dad spoke first. I was wrong about what I said. It wasn't okay. That was it. One sentence, no eye contact, no warmth. Mom followed up with her usual brand of politeness as apology. We want to move forward. We don't want to dwell on all of this. That was it. No one said Ava's name. No one mentioned the years of cold shoulders, the dismissiveness, the brunch. Just some hollow words and the assumption we'd accept them like charity. I looked at Ava. She looked at me. Neither of us said anything for a long moment. Then I said, all right, if you're ready to move forward, we'll see how that looks. They smiled, relieved. Thought that was the end of it. Thought I'd let them slide back into their usual roles. Thought we'd eat pie at Christmas and pretend this never happened. But they didn't understand. I wasn't angry anymore. And that's what made me dangerous because now I wasn't looking for justice. I was just making sure they never got another chance to break anything I cared about again. They left our porch like they'd completed a performance, like they deserved applause for showing up, saying the bare minimum, and pretending it hadn't taken years of quiet cruelty to get to this point. I didn't give them the satisfaction. Neither did Ava. As soon as the door shut behind us, Ava tossed her phone onto the coffee table and collapsed onto the couch. That's what they call an apology. I didn't answer. I just sat down beside her, still hearing my dad's voice in my head. That stiff, stilted line about being wrong. Not sorry. Wrong. As if he'd miscalculated a number, not belittled his daughter and granddaughter in public. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Because now I knew for sure. I didn't need their love. I didn't need their approval. I just needed distance. But it didn't last long. Wednesday night, Monica sent me a message that made me sit upright in bed. Heads up. Mom called Dylan. What do you mean? Called him. Said she wants to talk alone. Invited him to dinner. No joke. At first, I thought Monica was joking, but she followed it with a screenshot. My mom texting Dylan like they were old friends. We'd love to get to know you better. Maybe you and I can talk. Clear the air. I stared at it. My mother, who once made Monica throw out a gift Dylan gave her because she thought it looked criminal, was now rolling out a red carpet. I called Monica immediately. What the hell is this? He sounded tired. Not surprised. They're losing control, Barb. You unplugged from their fantasy and now they're scrambling. Dad told me yesterday that you've always misunderstood them. I think they really believe that. I think they've rewritten everything in their heads to make it your fault. And now they're trying to charm Dylan or manage him. That Friday it got weirder. Ava got a voicemail from a cousin we hadn't heard from in years. Karen, one of Dad's sister's daughters. We never talk. Not for any reason. Just one of those relatives who floats around family weddings and says things like, "We really should catch up." Now suddenly she was calling Ava. Not me. Ava played the voicemail for me. "Hey, sweetheart. It's Karen. I heard there's been some tension in the family. Just wanted to say, I'm here if you want to talk about anything. Sometimes grown-ups make things more complicated than they need to be. Anyway, call me if you ever want to chat." I paused it halfway through. "How'd she even get your number?" Ava shrugged. "I didn't give it to her. I knew what this was. They weren't just trying to fix things. They were trying to build their case. They knew they couldn't reach me directly, so now they were circling, pulling in outsiders, creating this illusion of concern to make it look like I was the one burning the house down." The next day, Monica showed up at my door again. This time, she didn't even sit down, just stood in the entryway with her keys in hand and a strange kind of energy. "We found a place," she said. "Dylan and I. It's small, a mess, but it's ours." I stared at her. "You're really moving out?" "Yeah. I told Mom this morning." Her face felt like I just announced I was joining a cult. She didn't ask why, just said, "Well, I hope this doesn't mean you're cutting us off too." That's exactly what it meant. Not a total cut, just the cord they used to pull every time they wanted control. It was gone. Dad raged. She turned to leave, then paused. "They're calling people Barbara, not just Karen. Aunt Lynn called me yesterday, said she was worried about you. Dad probably told her you've been unstable or angry or something." I almost laughed. Unstable for not letting them humiliate us at brunch. That's what happens when you stop cooperating with their story. They turn you into the villain so they can be the victims. He was right, and for once we weren't fighting. We were aligned. Felt strange. Good, but strange. After she left, Ava came into the room with her laptop. "Do you think they'll come after you next? Like, try to get your boss's number or something?" I actually stopped what I was doing and looked at her. "I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me because when people like that lose power, they don't let go. They scramble, they recruit, they twist, they spin. But I had something they couldn't touch anymore. Boundaries, Ava, and a sister who finally understood." By Monday, the silence started changing shape. It wasn't quiet anymore. It was curated. People who hadn't spoken to me in years started popping up like they'd been waiting backstage for their cue. The first one was Kelly. We were close in high school, but she stayed in our hometown and fell into Mom's church circle. I hadn't heard from her in almost a decade. Then suddenly, a Facebook message. "Hey Barb, your mom mentioned you're going through some personal struggles. Just wanted to say I'm praying for you. Let me know if you ever want to grab coffee, red heart." No details, just vague enough to sound kind, just pointed enough to feel like a nudge. I didn't respond. 2 hours later, I got a message from an old neighbor, then a cousin. One by one, I realized Mom was planting the story, but not the real one. Not the one where she and Dad humiliated me in front of my daughter. She was writing a different version. In her story, I was the unsteady one, the bitter one, the angry daughter who cut off her family for no reason. She left out the brunch. She left out the years of silent jabs and withheld affection. And somehow in this new version, Ava was collateral, an innocent being isolated by her unstable mother. It was a soft campaign, subtle, not meant to confront, just to discredit. Then on Wednesday, Ava came in holding an envelope. No return address, just my name. Inside was a card, white, plain, a fake gold border, and inside printed text. No handwriting. "Family doesn't give up. Even when it's difficult, even when you're hurting. We love you, Barbara." No name, no clue who sent it. I tossed it in the trash without a word. Ava didn't ask. She just nodded like she understood more than she should have to at 16. That same evening, Monica called. "You're not going to believe this." She was breathing fast like she'd just gotten off a treadmill. "Mom called Dylan again." "What?" "She invited him over alone. Said she wanted to make him feel welcome. Then she asked if he'd ever considered a job closer to the family." I sat in silence. "She's trying to recruit him, though. She's trying to divide us. She thinks Dylan will open up about our plans. Like he's going to accidentally spill some secret family betrayal she can use against us." "Did he go?" He told her he was busy. She asked him again an hour later. And again today. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The woman who once said Dylan gave off motorcycle gang energy now wanted to have tea with him. This wasn't reconciliation. This was strategy. She couldn't control me anymore, so she was reaching for the people around me, making me look like the unstable one while she smiled and called it love. But that wasn't the worst part. Friday night, Monica called again. They came over without warning. What? They showed up at my door, said they wanted to talk, and she paused. Then her voice went flat. They think you're damaging Ava, that you're poisoning her against the family. Dad said, this isn't healthy. You're letting Barbara drag you down. She stopped. I could hear something clinking in the background, maybe a spoon against a mug, but her voice stayed cold. And then Mom said, we can still fix this, but you have to choose what kind of life you want. Like that was normal. Like it was a reasonable thing to say about your own daughter and granddaughter. I gripped the edge of the table. They're trying to isolate me, reposition me as the problem so they can stay the victims. Monica was quiet. They said if I move in with Dylan, they won't help me anymore, that I'll be on my own. Like that's supposed to scare me, is it? She exhaled. Oh, not anymore. That weekend, Ava had to make a photo collage for school. Important people in my life. I asked who she wanted to include. He shrugged. Just you, me, and Monica. That's it. You sure? Yeah, that's my real family. And that was when it hit me. They weren't fighting to win me back. They were fighting to keep their version of the story intact. And they were losing because Ava didn't need their names on a chart to know who stood beside her. And Monica wasn't scared anymore. And I wasn't playing. It wasn't over. Not to them. For people like my parents, nothing ends unless they say it does. And even then, it just pauses until they can reshape it into something they can control again. I knew they'd try one more time, but I didn't know when. Came the week after Ava submitted that photo collage. She got called into the counselor's office. At first, I thought it was about a class schedule, but she came home pale, holding a pink slip in her hand. Grandma called the school. I stared at her. What? She said she was concerned for me, that I might be depressed. She asked if the school had resources for families in distress. I took the slip and sat down. It wasn't even subtle anymore. They were trying to manufacture a narrative. If they couldn't get Ava back into their orbit, they'd make me look like a danger to her. They couldn't stand that she chose me, that Monica chose herself, and worse, they couldn't prove we'd done anything wrong. So they started implying. I called the school, asked to speak to the counselor. The woman on the line sounded unsure, awkward. We're not taking any action, she said. But the call was logged. It was unusual. She said she was your daughter's primary female elder. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were trying to bury me under a story they made up, and they were using my child to do it. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was anxious, because I was calculating. I started going through every message, every voicemail, every photo. I wasn't going to fight them. I was going to finish this. The next morning I called Monica. You said they threatened to cut you off, right? Yeah. Well, they can't cut you off if they don't have anything left to hold over you. She paused. What are you planning? Nothing big. Just the final nail. I opened a group message, the same one Mom used for holiday invites and birthday reminders, and last year a picture of her new silverware set. Like we were supposed to care. I typed, since there seems to be some confusion, Ava and I are fine. Monica is fine. What's not fine is the repeated interference, the false concern, the calls to her school, and the manipulation. If you continue trying to wedge yourselves into our lives under the guise of help, we will treat it as harassment. I clicked send, then I blocked both of them. 2 days later, Monica showed up at my door again. This time, she wasn't alone. Dylan was carrying a tote bag full of groceries and a folding chair. Monica just looked at me and said quietly, they're begging me to talk to you. Said they're deeply misunderstood. Said they'll apologize properly this time. I leaned against the door frame. What made them change their tone? I told them Dylan's moving in next week unless they get their act together. I told them I was done protecting their feelings. That if they don't show up and do it right, no fake smiles, no script, I'm gone for good. I looked at Dylan. He just shrugged. They hate me, he said, but they fear her more. 3 days passed. Then like clockwork, their car pulled up again. This time there were no pearls, no golf polo, just 2 older people standing at my porch, eyes low, hands empty. We didn't go outside. We let them knock twice. Then Ava opened the door. You here to apologize? My mother nodded. To both of us? She hesitated, then nodded again. We let them in. Not because we wanted to fix anything, but because we needed to hear what they'd finally decided to say. They sat on the couch. No tea, no snacks, no small talk. Dad spoke first. For once, it wasn't a lecture. We pushed you away. That's on us. Mom followed. We let things rot too long, and then tried to force them back together without taking responsibility. That wasn't right. It wasn't warm. It wasn't even that sincere. But it was something. And maybe more importantly, it was theirs. Monica was right. They weren't scared of losing us. They were scared of losing the story, of losing the image of a family that never existed in the first place. They didn't stay long. As they left, Mom turned back and looked at Ava. We hope you'll come by sometime. Ava didn't answer. He just nodded politely. When the door shut behind them, we all sat quietly. Then Dylan said, So, does this mean I'm not moving in? Monica smirked. Oh, it means you're bringing your drums. And for the first time in a very long time, I laughed. Really laughed. Not because we won, but because we finally stopped losing. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Mom wrote, We're keeping Thanksgiving small, just the family that fits. My sister added, And no kids this time? They're too loud. My daughter looked at me confused. We're not family. I just said, Guess not. Then I froze their credit card. 2 hours later, the waiter brought the bill and they turned pale. My name's Sarah. And if there's one thing that's always gotten under my skin, it's how easily my family can pretend I don't exist. Or worse, that my daughter doesn't. She's 7. Her name is Ivy. She talks too much when she's excited, laughs with her whole chest, and carries a little stuffed bunny named Sprinkle everywhere we go. She's loud sometimes, of course she is. She's a kid. But she's also the sweetest, kindest soul I've ever met. And yet, to my family, she's treated like a mosquito buzzing around their ears at a barbecue. Started small. When Ivy was 3, my mom asked if we could just leave her with a sitter for Christmas Eve dinner because it was going to be a long night and she wouldn't enjoy herself anyway. That year, we stayed home. The next time we showed up, I noticed how they didn't even pull out the high chair for her. My sister had already started calling Ivy the noise machine behind my back. Except sometimes not even behind my back. So I kept trying. Every holiday, every birthday, I RSVP'd. I showed up. I brought gifts. I offered to help clean. I held Ivy's hand tightly when she asked why no one ever really talked to her. I told her it was just a big family and sometimes people get distracted. But this year, this Thanksgiving, they didn't even bother hiding it. Mom sent a message to the family group chat on a random Wednesday afternoon. I was helping Ivy cut out construction paper leaves for her What I'm Thankful For tree. She wrote, We're keeping Thanksgiving small this year. Just the family that fits. Then seconds later, my sister added, And no kids this time. They're too loud. I just sat there for a moment. I thought maybe it was a joke. Like maybe someone would follow up with a laughing emoji or something. But nope, that was it. Just cold, neat rejection. Ivy looked up from her craft and asked if Grandma was going to like the leaf she made for her. She had written, I'm thankful for my grandma because she makes pumpkin pie. That one nearly broke me. When she asked, Are we not going to Grandma's this year? I said, Guess not. And that was the moment I stopped pretending like I didn't notice. That was the moment something inside me just clicked. I opened the banking app and stared at the joint credit card, the one I stupidly added them to 3 years ago when Dad lost his job and they needed help. I was a single mom working part-time and taking night classes. And they asked if I could cover a few expenses, just until we get on our feet. But they never got off their knees, and suddenly they were buying concert tickets, fancy cookware, and weekly takeout using my card. They never once offered to take it off my hands. But I let it slide because they were family, because they were going through something, because I kept thinking maybe if I kept being generous, they'd start to treat Ivy with the same decency. They never did. That night, they had a reservation at Monroe's. Ivy was already in bed, tired from her school play rehearsal. I sat down on the couch, pulled up the app, and hit freeze card. No warning, no guilt. Around 8:30, I saw my sister post a photo on her Instagram story. Mom smiling, holding a giant glass of red wine. The caption said, "Family night, peace and quiet." Smiling face with heart eyes, wine glass. I kept refreshing the group chat. Right on time, 8:46 p.m., my phone lit up. Dad, "Hey, is the card acting weird?" Says declined. Then, Mom, "Sarah, they're bringing the bill. What did you do?" And finally, Sister, "Are you kidding me? It's $912. You're paying for this." I didn't answer. Instead, I poured myself a glass of boxed wine, curled up on the couch, and turned on a baking competition with the volume a little louder than usual. Just enough noise, because for once I wasn't going to explain myself. They said we didn't fit, so I removed the piece of me that had been holding them up all along. What they didn't know was that this was just the beginning. By the time I woke up the next morning, my phone looked like a crime scene. Missed calls from Mom, Dad, and my sister, 27 in total. Group chat blowing up. A voicemail sitting there like a ticking bomb. I didn't touch any of it at first. Ivy was already up humming while she drew turkeys at the kitchen table. I poured my coffee and just watched her color, thinking how ridiculous it was that anyone would consider her presence a burden. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I put on headphones and listened to the voicemail while Ivy sang to herself in the background. It was Mom. She didn't yell. That's not her style. But every word was soaked in condescension. She said the card being declined at the restaurant was humiliating, that the waiter made a scene, and that Dad had to borrow a card from one of their friends to cover the $912 bill. She used words like disgraceful and childish, and ended it with, "You've embarrassed this family." I laughed. What family? I made Ivy pancakes, whipped cream, chocolate chips, extra syrup, and told her we'd do something special on Thanksgiving. Just the two of us. She asked if we could build a pillow fort and eat pie inside it. I said, "Sure." And she grinned like it was the best idea she'd ever heard. That moment alone made everything I'd done feel right. Around noon, I finally texted the group chat. "You said we didn't fit. I'm just making space." Not even 30 seconds later, my sister responded, "You are mentally unstable. You need help. That was Mom's birthday dinner, and you made her cry in front of everyone." Then my dad chimed in, "Grow up. This wasn't about Ivy. We just wanted one peaceful dinner. Just one." And my mom followed with her own gem. "You've been using that card, too. You don't get to act like a martyr now, right?" Except they weren't the ones buying diapers at 2 a.m. They weren't using it to survive. They were buying patio furniture and booking deep tissue massages. I opened the banking app and pulled up the statement. Just in the last 4 weeks, $1,417 spent. Not a single thing for Ivy. Not a single thing for me. I took screenshots and sent them back in the chat. If you want to talk about what I've used, here's the list. Unless you're paying me back by Friday, I'm reporting unauthorized use. Don't test me. I blocked all 3 of them right after that. Then the texts started rolling in from other relatives. Aunt Karen called first. She always calls when someone dies or a baby's born. Never in between. She asked what was going on and why the family was in flames. I told her the truth. They excluded my daughter, and I stopped paying for their comfort. She said, "Oh." Like that explained everything and nothing at the same time. That afternoon, I got a friend request from someone I didn't recognize. Then another. Then a message from someone I hadn't talked to since college. "Saw your sister's post. Yikes. You okay?" Of course, she'd gone public. She'd posted a long Facebook rant about boundaries and toxic people who use money to control others. No names, but it was obvious. The comments were full of sympathy from people who didn't know a thing about what really happened. She'd always been good at rewriting stories to make herself the victim, but I wasn't playing the quiet role anymore. They wanted me and Ivy out of the picture. Fine, but they could do it on their own dime now. What none of them realized was this wasn't about money anymore. It was about how they'd made a little girl feel like she didn't belong in her own bloodline. That kind of damage doesn't wash off with a Facebook apology or a forced invitation. And I knew them. They weren't going to let this die quietly. Not after being embarrassed in front of their friends. Not after being forced to face how much they depended on the very daughter they loved to dismiss. This was just the spark. The fire was still coming. By Wednesday, it was like someone had flipped a switch and set the whole family on fire. My phone was blowing up. Not with direct messages from my parents or sister anymore. They'd apparently moved on to full-blown damage control. I started getting messages from people I barely remembered existed. Old high school friends, distant cousins, my mom's yoga buddy from Arizona. All of them sending me screenshots from social media. My sister's Facebook looked like a bad breakup diary. She posted a photo of herself and mom having coffee on their back patio. Both of them smiling in that staged, passive-aggressive way. The caption said, "At least I still know who real family is." Yellow heart. Some people forget what holidays are really about. I guess public pity was the new currency now that they couldn't swipe mine. The comments were even worse. "She cut off your mom's card. That's financial abuse. Who raises a child like that and expects to be respected? I'd never let her near my kids. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so disgusting." They painted this perfect little picture of betrayal. Like I just woke up one day and decided to humiliate my mother in a restaurant for fun. Like Ivy didn't even exist in the story. Not one of them mentioned how she was the one excluded. Not one word about how they told me she was too loud to be included in Thanksgiving dinner. They were rewriting history in real time and people were eating it up. And then, like some twisted cherry on top, I got an email from the bank. Someone attempted to unfreeze your card ending in 4217. They actually tried to sneak back in, my mother probably thinking I'd be too distracted to notice. I called the bank immediately, closed the card for good, removed all secondary access, and changed every linked password. I wasn't just cutting them off. I was making sure they couldn't find their way back in with a crowbar. That night, a new group chat popped up on my phone. Family talk. It included mom, dad, my sister, and weirdly my cousin Drew. He usually stayed as far away from drama as humanly possible, so I knew right away they dragged him in to act as their peace puppet. The messages came fast, like they'd been rehearsed. "This has gone on long enough. We're willing to move past it if you'll be reasonable. It's Thanksgiving, Sarah. Don't ruin it for everyone. Sister, you embarrassed the entire family. We gave you a chance to apologize. You're choosing not to. Dad, you made your point. Let's not drag this out. Stop acting like the victim." Drew hesitating, "Hey, maybe we could all meet and just talk this out. No yelling. Just fix this before it gets worse." I didn't answer right away. I just sat there on the couch, my laptop open but untouched, while Ivy lay on the floor drawing a turkey with sunglasses and a skateboard. She asked if I could make mini pies this year instead of one big one so we could each decorate our own. I told her yes. That moment, her little voice, that dumb drawing, the joy on her face at the idea of a pie just for her, reminded me why I was doing this. Not for revenge, not even for justice, just so she'd never again have to wonder if she was too much to be loved by her own family. I eventually opened the chat and typed one line. "You said we didn't fit, so stop acting surprised that I stepped out. Ivy and I are doing our own thing. Enjoy your quiet dinner." 2 hours of silence. Then my sister replied, "You're isolating your own child. But sure, keep pretending you're the good guy." I blocked the chat. I wasn't isolating Ivy. I was protecting her from people who didn't see her as a person. Later that night, I got a message from my cousin Jess. She's one of the few I actually trust. "Heads up, Grandpa's pissed. Like seriously pissed. He called me earlier. I think he's about to get involved." I asked what he said, but she didn't answer. Not at first. Then about 20 minutes later, a blocked number called me. I let it go to voicemail. It was Grandpa, and he wasn't mad at me. I didn't listen to the voicemail right away. I stared at it for a long time, heart thumping like I was 16 again and just got caught sneaking out. Grandpa never calls. He's old school. Shows up when it matters, never says more than necessary, and never, ever takes sides. He'll know. I waited until Ivy was asleep, curled up with Sprinkle and 2 pie-themed storybooks. Then I pressed play. His voice was clear. No coughing, no shaking, no filler words. I'm coming over tomorrow at 6. Be ready. We're fixing this. Don't invite them. I'll take care of it. That was it. Nothing else. 1. The next evening, I was pacing my living room, still trying to figure out what fixing this meant in Grandpa language. Ivy was in her room playing with Legos. I'd made dinner just in case, though I had no idea if he was staying long or just dropping off a guilt bomb and disappearing. Then at 5:56, headlights pulled into my driveway. No knock, just the door opening. He still had the spare key I gave him years ago when I moved in and locked myself out once. I never asked for it back. He walked in carrying a casserole dish wrapped in an old kitchen towel. Said it was chicken tetrazzini, then sat down at my kitchen table like he'd done it every Thursday of his life. I sat across from him. No one spoke for a solid minute. Then he said, "They crossed a line." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. He went on, "I called your dad this morning." He tried to explain what happened. Kept going in circles. So I told him to shut up. Another pause. He took a bite of casserole like this was a casual lunch break. I told them I'm having Thanksgiving here, and if they want to eat, they'll show up and apologize. Not to me, to Ivy. I blinked. Wait, here? Like here. He nodded. And not a word about it to them. I'll handle the invitations. You just cook whatever you were going to cook. Don't worry about the rest. Took me a few seconds to realize what he was doing. He wasn't asking for a truce. He was staging a takeover. The next morning, I got a text from my sister. Grandpa said we're coming to your house for Thanksgiving? Then my mom. Is this a joke? After everything you're hosting? I didn't reply. He said, I made a list. Ivy and I went grocery shopping. We got the mini pie crusts she wanted. We got cranberries even though no one really eats them. I cleaned the house. Not for them, for us. Then Thanksgiving morning, something unexpected happened. Around 10 a.m., while the turkey was still in the oven, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my sister alone. No makeup, no filters. She looked nervous. Before I could say anything, Ivy ran past me and shouted, "Are you here for pie?" My sister froze. Then she knelt down, looked Ivy in the eye and said, "I came to say sorry." And for once, she meant it. But that was only the beginning, because 2 hours later, my dad walked in holding a cheap, store-bought pumpkin pie and a folded lawn chair under his arm. And 5 minutes after that, Grandpa slapped him across the back of the head before he even got his boots off. It wasn't hard, but it wasn't playful either. It was the kind of slap that made your ears ring, even if it didn't hit you. Ivy looked up from her plate and asked, "Dad, serious? Was that on purpose?" Dad didn't say a word. His mouth was halfway open like he was about to say something smug. Probably some half-hearted apology wrapped in a joke. But the slap knocked whatever he had planned straight out of his brain. He just stood there still holding that crumpled pie in one hand and a beat-up folding chair in the other. Grandpa didn't raise his voice, didn't get dramatic. He just said, "If you keep acting like an ass, you won't see a cent of my will." Mom, who'd walked in 2 minutes earlier with her green bean casserole and her usual, "I'm still the center of everything" aura, went completely still. The look on her face was a mix of shock and panic, like someone just yanked her mortgage out from under her. My sister, she didn't even move. She just slowly lowered her phone into her purse. Yeah, she was filming it. Of course she was. Grandpa stepped fully into the room like he owned the place. And let's be honest, in that moment he absolutely did. He dropped his coat on a chair and nodded toward the table. "Let's eat." We all sat. Ivy insisted he take the head of the table. She'd made everyone place cards out of construction paper and glitter glue. And Grandpa's had 2 stars and a very aggressive drawing of a turkey in sunglasses. He smiled when he saw it. Then, as if nothing had just happened, he picked up his fork and took a bite of mashed potatoes. Nobody else moved. Not until he said, without looking up, I said, "Let's eat." That wasn't a suggestion, so we ate. For the first 20 minutes, the only sound was silverware against plates and Ivy asking people if they liked their pies. Everyone lied and said they were amazing, which was generous considering the crusts were half-burned and the filling was straight from a can. But it didn't matter. She was proud, and for the first time they actually acted like she mattered. Then Grandpa wiped his mouth with a napkin, leaned back in his chair and said, "All right, let's talk." You could feel the tension pulse across the room. He looked at my mom first. "You know what bothers me," he said. "It's not that you didn't invite Sarah. It's that you didn't invite Ivy. That little girl loves you, and you made her feel like she didn't belong. For what? A quiet meal? Peace and quiet is for retirement homes." Mom tried to play it off. She started with her usual, "We just needed something low stress this year" line. But Grandpa didn't let her finish. "You don't exclude children from family dinners, especially not your grandchild. You don't like noise? Buy earplugs." Next he turned to my sister. "You let your mother say it, then doubled down like it was some kind of movement. You called your niece too loud on a public platform. You posted about your own sister like she was trash. And you let people believe she was cruel to your mother." She started to cry. Real or fake, I couldn't tell. But it didn't change his tone. "You want people to respect you, but you can't even own what you did." Then finally he looked at my dad. "You were quiet through all of this, watching it happen, letting them walk all over your daughter and your granddaughter like it wasn't your problem. It was easier to let Sarah pay for things and stay out of the drama, wasn't it?" Dad looked like he was going to protest, but instead he just nodded. Grandpa reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was thick, off-white, not printer paper. He unfolded it carefully and placed it on the table like it was a map. "My updated will," he said. "I rewrote it last week. Everyone's still on it for now." You could feel the air shift. "But let me make something clear," he continued. "I see everything. I'm not senile. I'm not blind. You keep treating Sarah and Ivy like outsiders? I'll take your names off this paper myself. You want to play cold? Fine. You'll end up with cold." He folded the will back up and put it in his pocket. Then he looked at Ivy and asked her if she'd made extra pies. He grinned. "I made 5. That's perfect," he said. "Because you and your mom, you're the only ones here acting like real family." And for the rest of dinner, the room was different. Not warm, not healed, but quiet in a way that wasn't forced. No one tried to challenge Grandpa. No one tried to act like things hadn't gone off the rails. They were suddenly polite, careful, like people trying not to wake a sleeping bear. After dessert, Grandpa pulled me aside before leaving. "You did the right thing," he said. "Don't let them twist it. You drew the line. Now they know where it is." He hugged Ivy on the way out and told her the next pie she made better have blueberries. She said, "Only if you promise to come back." He winked. "I'll bring whipped cream." And for the first time in years, I felt like someone in my family actually stood behind me. Not just because they had to, because they wanted to. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I opened the mailbox and saw an envelope addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. For a second, I almost didn't open it. I stood there on the porch, the wind picking up, the envelope warm from sitting in the sun, and I wondered if I even wanted to know what was inside. Another passive-aggressive dig, a printed-out Facebook post, a Bible verse. But when I opened it, all it said was this: "We were wrong. We'll try harder." No name, no excuses, just one sentence written in pen. I stared at it longer than I probably should have. Then I stuck it on the fridge with a magnet and didn't mention it to anyone. Over the next few days, things started changing. Not in a dramatic, movie-ending kind of way. No big tearful reunions or emotional speeches, just small shifts. That Wednesday night, Mom called. She didn't bring up the slap, didn't mention Grandpa's will or the group chat that went nuclear. Instead, she asked how Ivy was doing in school. Told me she saw an ad for a holiday kids concert and wondered if Ivy was performing in one. "She is," I said. "Jingle Bell Rock." She's been rehearsing it in her pajamas every night. I'd like to come, she said. Then come. The next day, my sister sent Ivy a text. No words, just a video of a golden retriever in a Santa hat being pulled around the kitchen on a Roomba. Ivy watched it 5 times, then recorded herself spinning in circles, yelling, "I'm a reindeer," and sent it back. No follow-up, just that. By the weekend, I stopped blocking every number I didn't recognize. And then a week before the concert, something happened that caught me completely off guard. It was Saturday morning. Ivy was building a fort out of couch cushions, still in her pajamas, her hair a wild mess from sleep. I was in the kitchen drinking reheated coffee, trying to plan out the week when there was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole and nearly dropped my mug. It was Dad, alone. He was standing there holding a plain brown shoebox. Not gift-wrapped, not fancy, just duct-taped around the edges and a yellow sticky note on top that said, "I found her." I opened the door, and he handed it to me without saying anything. Ivy peeked around the corner and came running. When she opened the box, she gasped so loud it startled me. Inside was Sprinkle. Not a replacement, her Sprinkle, the exact same stuffed bunny she lost 2 years ago on that Florida trip. The one we searched hotel rooms and car seats for. The one she cried about for weeks. I looked at him confused. "She was listed on eBay," he said. "Some hotel probably found her, put her in a lost and found bin, and someone sold her off. Took me a while, but the tag was still faded in the same spot." Ivy hugged the bunny so tight I thought the ears might pop off. Then she looked up at him and said, "Do you want to watch cartoons with me?" And he said, "Yeah, I think I do." They sat on the floor together. Ivy tucked between the 2 Sprinkles, one in each arm. And Dad just sat there, not checking his phone, not rushing, just sitting with her watching cartoons. I didn't say anything. I just went into the kitchen and let the moment be. Later that night, Mom called again. She didn't ask for anything, just asked if we wanted to come over next weekend for a small dinner. "Just us," she said. "No drama." I told her we'd think about it. When the concert finally came, Ivy wore the sparkly red dress she picked out weeks earlier. She was bouncing backstage with the other kids, shouting the lyrics, even when the teacher asked them to use indoor voices. And when the curtain opened, I looked out across the little gymnasium and saw them. All of them. Mom, Dad, my sister, Grandpa in the middle, arms crossed, looking like he'd made sure they all showed up on time or risked getting cut out of more than a will. And when Ivy started to sing loud, proud, a little off-key, none of them flinched. They clapped the hardest. At the end, Grandpa stood up and yelled, "Encore!" Even though there wasn't one, Ivy lit up like the stage lights were for her alone. Christmas, we went to Grandpa's house. Ivy got the biggest gift under the tree. My sister helped her build it. Dad showed her how to change the batteries. Mom helped her cut her turkey. No one made her sit at the kids' table. He was right there with us, loud, messy, laughing with her mouth full. And for the first time in a long time, no one looked uncomfortable. No one said she was too much. She had a seat at the table. And now they all understood she wasn't going anywhere. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I paid $11,000 for my sister's baby shower. Venue, decor, private chef. A few days before, she sent a message. "It's really just close family. Don't make it awkward by showing up." My mom added, "It's her moment. Be mature." So I pulled the venue payment, canceled the caterer, and froze the event account. The morning of, I got 19 calls and 1 message. I was 3 days away from hosting what I thought would be the most extravagant thing I'd ever done for family. My brother's baby shower. $11,600 already spent. The venue booked and paid for in full months ago. Decor picked out down to the smallest detail, from hand-painted table signs to flower arrangements that matched the exact nursery theme. A private chef booked for a 5-course menu that we'd planned together on a Zoom call. I'd even hired a photographer whose work they'd admired for years. It wasn't just money I was pouring into this. It was time, effort, and love. I'd been chasing down RSVPs, working late into the night to coordinate with vendors, and rearranging my own work schedule to make sure everything would be perfect. And to be honest, this wasn't even the first time I'd done something like this. My brother and his wife have been through a lot financially, and I've been the safety net. Rent? I've covered it. Car repairs? I paid for those. Unexpected bills? Always me. This baby shower was supposed to be my gift, my way of making them feel celebrated without worrying about money. Then her message came in. It was short, cold. It's really just close family. Don't make it awkward by showing up. I sat there rereading it. I thought maybe it was a bad joke or that she'd worded it wrong. I was literally close family. I was his only sibling. But no, it was exactly what it looked like. She was uninviting me from the baby shower I was bankrolling. Before I could even think of how to respond, my mom's text arrived. It's her moment. Be mature. That one hit harder than hers. I'd expected my mom to defend me, to say something like, "Of course, Alex will be there." Instead, she was telling me to step aside, like I was a guest who had somehow overstepped. Something shifted in my head right then. I didn't even feel angry at first. It was more like a sudden, cold clarity. If I wasn't welcome to be there, my money wasn't welcome either. So I acted. I called the venue and explained there was a change in plans. Payment reversed. I emailed the chef and apologized, canceled the booking, and took the hit on the deposit. I contacted the decorator and told her to stop all work. Then I logged into the event account I had created specifically to cover surprise expenses and froze it. By the time I was done, every moving piece of that shower had been dismantled. The entire thing collapsed in under 2 hours. The following morning, I woke up to 19 missed calls. Half from my mom, half from my brother, and a few from unknown numbers. Then there was one message sitting at the top of my notifications. Call me now. We need to talk before you ruin everything. It was signed with my sister-in-law's father's name. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be a simple family disagreement. It was about to become a war. I didn't call him back right away. I let the phone ring, watched the screen light up with number after number, most of them unfamiliar. The coffee machine was still sputtering when I sat down at the kitchen table and just stared at it, letting the noise of the calls fade into the background. Finally, after almost an hour of ignoring them, I picked up one. It was her dad. He didn't bother with greetings. His first words were about how disappointed he was in me. He said I was acting like a child, that I had no idea how hard pregnancy had been on his daughter, and that I was being cruel to ruin the happiest day of her life. Then, without taking a breath, he dropped the line that made me feel like someone had just dumped ice water on my head. You're the only one in this family who earns well. It's your responsibility to help. He said it like it was a fact, not an opinion. Like my income was some kind of communal family fund. I told him very clearly that if I wasn't invited, I wasn't paying. That was it. His tone sharpened immediately. He accused me of making his daughter cry, of humiliating them in front of their friends, and of jeopardizing family relationships for years to come. I didn't argue. I just hung up. Within 10 minutes, my phone blew up again, this time with group messages. My mom sent a wall of text about how I was being immature and that I should rise above for the sake of the baby. She told me I was making things harder than they needed to be and that families forgive each other. Then my brother tried calling. When I didn't answer, he texted saying we could work this out later if I would just fix the situation. For now. That phrase, fix the situation, stuck in my head. It was like he still thought the problem was mine to solve, even though I was the one who'd been excluded. By early afternoon, my sister-in-law herself messaged me. She claimed she hadn't meant the message the way it sounded, that she was just trying to keep the guest list intimate. She said the baby shower was for women and close female family. But then she quickly pivoted into asking me to release the payments again for the baby's sake. I didn't reply. Around 4 p.m. there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find my brother standing there. He didn't look angry at first, more like desperate, but it didn't last. He started in about how I was overreacting and that the text from his wife was a misunderstanding. He said the event was still happening, but now everyone was scrambling because I pulled the money. He told me I was making her look bad in front of her friends and family. I told him exactly what I told his father-in-law. If I wasn't family enough to be invited, I wasn't family enough to pay. He stared at me for a long second before asking something that almost made me laugh. You're not going to take the car over this, right? The car. The one I bought for them last year when theirs died. The one that was in my name with insurance I paid for. At that moment, I didn't answer. But inside, something clicked into place. This wasn't about one event anymore. This was about years of being the safety net, the problem solver, the one who always came through, and them treating it like it was my duty, not my choice. By the time he left that night, I already knew. The baby shower was just the first thing I was pulling the plug on. The morning after my brother showed up, I sat at my desk with a notebook and my laptop, and for the first time in years, I looked at every single expense I had been covering for him and his wife. When I saw it all in one place, it was almost embarrassing. Not because I'd helped, but because I'd let it go on for so long without drawing any lines. The car was the first thing on my list. I'd bought it for them last year when theirs broke down. My name was on the title, registration, and insurance. They had free use of it, a full tank every time I visited, and I never asked for a dime. Now, it felt like the most obvious cord to cut. I called the insurance company, told them to remove both their names from the policy, and set the coverage to end in 3 days. Then I texted my brother to let him know I'd be picking up the car on Friday. No explanation, just the time. Next were the utilities. Months earlier, they'd called me in a panic because their internet was going to be shut off. I'd taken over that bill temporarily. Temporary had turned into almost a year. Same with half their electric bill. I'd been paying it directly every month. Both accounts were in my name, so it took less than 5 minutes to cancel them. Then I moved to the baby savings account I'd been quietly funding for almost a year, for $100 every month set aside for emergencies. Once the baby came, I closed it and transferred every cent back into my own account. By noon, I'd erased more than $1,000 a month in financial support they'd been leaning on without even realizing how much it added up to. The calls started almost immediately. My brother tried first 6 times back to back. I let them ring out. Then my mom called, and she didn't ask anything. She just launched into how I'd gone too far and how I needed to remember that family comes before money. I told her this had nothing to do with money. It had to do with respect. She didn't want to hear it. An hour later, my sister-in-law texted me. Gone was the half-apology tone from before. This time she accused me of being vindictive and punishing an unborn child because my ego was hurt. I didn't bother replying. By early evening, I heard another knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, there stood her dad. He didn't look angry. He looked smug, like he'd come prepared to win an argument. In his hand was a single sheet of paper. He handed it to me without saying a word. It was a list of everything I had committed to over the past year. The car, the shower, the monthly payments, even a set of nursery furniture I'd agreed to help buy. At the bottom, he'd written a total in bold numbers. I'm not asking you to do everything, he said, but you should at least settle what you owe so they're not left struggling right before the baby comes. It took me a second to process the absurdity of it. He was acting like I'd signed a legal contract to bankroll their lives. I laughed, not politely, but the kind of laugh you give when something is so insane you can't even pretend to take it seriously. Then I closed the door in his face. 5 minutes later, my phone started vibrating nonstop again. My brother, my mom, a couple of cousins all calling or sending messages. Some were guilt trips about family unity. Others were more manipulative. Hints that I'd be blamed when the baby's arrival wasn't as joyful as it should be. That night, sitting in my living room, I realized I just crossed a line there was no coming back from. This wasn't a fight over one event anymore. This was a declaration that I was no longer their safety net. And judging by how they reacted, they never imagined the day would come. 2 mornings after I shut off the utilities and closed the baby savings account, I decided it was time to deal with the car. I didn't text, didn't call, just drove straight to my brother's house. My plan was simple. Get the keys, drive away, and end that chapter. Except when I pulled into the driveway, the car wasn't there. His wife's old hatchback sat crooked in the gravel. But the car I bought, the one I was paying insurance on, was nowhere in sight. The blinds were half closed, and I could see the faint shadow of someone moving in the front room. I knocked on the door. Nothing. Knocked again, louder. Still nothing. Fine. If they wanted to play hide and seek, I could play too. I sat in my car, called the tow company, and gave them the make, model, and plate. Since the car was in my name, they didn't even hesitate. The guy on the line said they'd find it within 48 hours. Turns out they didn't need that long. About 3 hours later, my phone rang. It was my brother, his voice tight with panic and rage. Apparently, the tow truck had shown up at his job's parking lot right in the middle of his shift and hauled the car away. He said his coworkers were staring out the window watching it happen, and now everyone knew I'd taken it back. "You embarrassed me at work," he said. "Do you have any idea how that makes me look?" I told him he should be more concerned with the fact that he thought he could keep a car that wasn't his, and hung up before he could respond. I thought that was the day's drama done. I was wrong. That evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered and nearly dropped the phone when I heard the voice on the other end. It was my dad. My dad, who had been absent for years. The man who never called on birthdays, never sent a text, never showed up for anything. Suddenly, he was on the phone saying my mother had asked him to talk sense into me. He started in with, "Your mom says you're tearing the family apart." Then came the speech about how when one person in a family does well, it's their duty to lift everyone else up. I was already rolling my eyes when he dropped a line that froze me. "They told me you promised to buy them a house next year. You're not backing out of that too, are you? A house? A house?" I had never, not once, promised them that. I hadn't even hinted at it. But apparently, in their version of events, I was already locked into future gifts I never agreed to give. After that call, I realized this wasn't just them taking advantage of me in the moment. They had been planning future ways to keep me on the hook. The next morning, I made another call to the furniture store. The nursery set I'd put on hold under my name was scheduled for delivery in a week. Crib, dresser, rocking chair, all of it. I canceled the order and had the deposit refunded to my account. They could figure it out themselves. A few hours later, there was a knock at my door. This time it was my brother. No yelling, no pretending to be reasonable, just straight up begging. Not for the baby shower, not for the furniture. He wanted me to at least keep paying the insurance on his wife's old hatchback because they couldn't afford to get a policy right now. I stood there listening, and for a moment I almost gave in. Almost. But that almost was exactly how I'd ended up here. Years of almost feeling bad, almost saying no, almost setting boundaries. That's how they'd kept me paying, fixing, and rescuing. Not anymore. I told him no. And when he kept asking, I just closed the door. It was the first time in years I'd shut him out completely. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally in control. After I told my brother no about the insurance, the silence from him lasted less than a day. By the next morning, the group text with my mom, him, and me lit up. Mom started it with, "Alex, enough is enough. You're hurting the whole family. Put the past week behind us and move forward." My brother followed with, "I'm sorry for how things went down with the shower, but don't punish us by taking away things we need to survive." That word, survive, got me. Survive from what? They still had jobs. They still had a roof over their heads. This wasn't survival. This was them missing the luxury of having me cover the gaps. By afternoon, my phone rang again. It was my mom. She didn't waste time. She said I had made my point and that now I needed to show grace by reinstating some of the support. She said I was taking things too far by cutting off the car, the bills, the furniture, and everything else. I asked her if she thought it was okay that I was uninvited from the baby shower I was paying for. She skirted the question, said it wasn't worth ending the relationship over, but in my mind, the relationship had been ending for a while. This was just the moment I finally admitted it to myself. 2 days later, I went to the tow lot to collect my car. I brought it home, parked it in my driveway, and for the first time in months, felt like something that was mine was actually mine. That night, my brother called again. Not angry this time, just defeated. He said he'd do anything if I just gave the car back or kept helping with a few essentials. When I didn't answer, he started listing things, the phone bill, gas money, even grocery gift cards. It was like watching someone try to bargain down a sentence. I didn't say yes to any of it. The following weekend, My parents invited me over for dinner. I went, thinking maybe they'd finally see my side. Instead, it was an ambush. My brother was there. My sister-in-law was there. Even her dad was there. The conversation started polite, then shifted fast. My mom said she'd raised me to always take care of family. My dad said money wasn't meant to be hoarded. My brother said this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about setting an example for the baby. I realized then that they weren't actually interested in fixing the relationship. They were interested in fixing their access to my wallet. So I stood up, told them they'd have to figure life out without me, and walked out. No long speeches, no dramatic goodbye, just done. That night, I blocked my brother's number. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt around my family in a long time: peace. Walking away didn't mean everything went quiet overnight. The first few weeks were loud. Constant calls from numbers I didn't know. Voicemails that started with soft concern and ended in guilt trips. Text messages that felt like they were written by a committee trying different angles. I ignored all of it. Then came the letters. Handwritten envelopes slipped into my mailbox with urgent scribbled across the front. Some were from my mom, some from my brother, one even from my sister-in-law. I never opened them. They went straight into a drawer. I figured if I ever doubted why I'd cut them off, I could open one and remind myself. Took about a month for the noise to die down. And when it did, the silence was almost unsettling. Over time, updates about my brother came in sideways through cousins or friends of friends. Apparently, the fallout hit him harder than I expected. With no car for me, no utilities in my name, no extra cash slipping into their account each month, they had to make real changes. He sold a bunch of things they couldn't afford to keep. Electronics, gaming equipment, a piece of jewelry his wife had gotten from her mother years ago, even her old hatchback. I braced myself for a downward spiral. But then I heard something that surprised me. He got a second job. Not something glamorous, warehouse work on the weekends, but it was steady and he stuck with it. His wife started doing online freelance work, which I'd never seen her even attempt before. They moved into a smaller apartment in a cheaper part of town, and for the first time in years, they were actually paying their bills on time. I didn't learn any of this from them directly. In fact, the first time I saw real proof of it was when my cousin sent me a photo of my brother holding his baby, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. No forced grin, no tension in his eyes. He looked lighter. It hit me in a strange way. I wasn't there for the birth. I wasn't there for the first birthday. But in that picture, I could see what I'd been saying all along. He could stand on his own. He just never had to. My parents still think I was wrong. My mom says family doesn't turn their back when things get messy. My dad says money isn't meant to be kept in one pair of hands. I don't waste my breath explaining anymore. For them, admitting I was right would mean admitting they let this pattern go on for years. The rare times I see my brother now, holidays, a random family barbecue, it's civil. We talk about the weather, sports, nothing deep. There's no shouting, no awkward apologies. Just two people who happen to share blood and a history, but no obligations. And the truth is, I still care about him. Cutting him off didn't erase that. It just shifted my focus to someone I'd been neglecting for years. Me. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that love without boundaries isn't kindness. It's enabling. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is step back and let them figure it out themselves. The irony? Without my help, my brother's doing better than he ever has. And so am I. 2 months after the baby was born, I was finally used to the quiet. No constant buzzing phone, no last-minute emergencies to cover, no guilt trips showing up in my mailbox. I'd started sleeping better. I'd even taken a weekend trip, something I hadn't done in years because I was always saving for whatever crisis my brother and his wife would throw at me next. Then out of nowhere, I got a knock at my door. It was a weekday afternoon and I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I froze. My sister-in-law was standing there. She wasn't holding the baby. She wasn't smiling. She looked tense. She asked if she could come in. I hesitated but stepped aside. We sat at the kitchen table and she launched right in. No small talk. She told me she and my brother had been fighting a lot since the baby came. Money was still tight even with his extra job and her freelance work. She admitted she'd been wrong about how the baby shower went, that uninviting me was stupid and emotional. She even said my brother agreed now that they'd handled it badly. Then came the twist. She didn't want money. She didn't want the car back. She wanted me to move in with them temporarily. I thought she was joking, but she was serious. She said they needed help with the baby so she could work more hours, that if I lived there for a few months she could get more clients, my brother could focus on his job, and they could finally get ahead. I just stared at her. After everything, the uninviting, the guilt trips, the list from her father of what I supposedly owed them. Now she wanted me to give up my space, my peace, and my time to fix their life again. I told her no. Politely but firmly. She pushed. She said it wouldn't be like before, that they wouldn't expect money, just my time and energy. She even tried the "think of your niece" line. I walked her to the door and told her I hoped things worked out for them, but I wasn't stepping back into that role. 2 days later, my mom called. Guess who had already told her their side of the story? According to them, I'd refused to help, even in a non-financial way. My mom tried to guilt me into reconsidering. I said no again. That night, I realized something. They hadn't actually changed. They just switched the way they tried to use me. And the only reason it didn't work this time was because I was finally ready to say no without feeling bad about it. Now on to the next story. Story 4. On my wedding, my family blocked me from the group chat. Then I found their vacation photos in Hawaii. Caption: the family's finally whole. I sent a single message: enjoy it while it lasts. That day, I pulled my name from the family business, froze the payroll account. A week later, the Internal Revenue Service called my dad. That evening, he knocked on my door for 20 minutes. I opened it. And then what caught me off guard wasn't just that they didn't show up. It was that they chose that exact moment on my wedding day to block me from the family group chat. I remember standing outside the venue just after the ceremony. The sun was setting. The sky had that soft golden tint, and everyone was headed into the reception hall. Emma was with her bridesmaids, laughing about how her veil kept catching wind. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I assumed it was another congratulations message, but when I looked, it said, "You have been removed from Smith Family Corporation." No warning, no context, just gone. I stared at the screen like it was written in another language. My first instinct was to assume it was a mistake. Maybe Caleb tapped something by accident. Maybe Dad got confused and was trying to mute notifications or change the group photo. We've had that group chat for 8 years. Holidays, birthdays, updates on the family business, everything went through it. But when I tried to open it, nothing. I was locked out. And that's when I started noticing they weren't there. No seats filled at their table. Their 4 chairs were perfectly lined up. Mom, Dad, Mark, and Caleb, all empty. The wait staff kept checking if they were late. My best friend, Alan, leaned over and asked if they were stuck in traffic. I just shrugged. I didn't want to ruin the evening. What made it worse was that they had RSVP'd not just once. They had responded to the online form, confirmed again via text a month before, and even talked about what they were wearing. My mom made a whole thing about not wanting to clash with the bridesmaids. Mark asked if his girlfriend could come, and I said yes. They weren't just expected. They were part of the damn plan. The photographer kept asking if we wanted to wait for them before doing family photos. I kept putting it off. Then eventually we just didn't include them, and Jody whispered during dinner and asked if something had happened between us. I told her I didn't know, and that was the truth. It wasn't until the 3rd day of our honeymoon that I got an answer. We were in Napa, just doing a few tastings before heading to our cabin rental. Emma was picking out a baba when I opened Instagram, just out of habit. And there they were, standing on a beach in Maui, all 4 of them in matching floral prints, holding cocktails, sunburnt and smiling. Mark even had his arm around Dad, who never does photos. The caption read, "The family is finally whole." I just sat there. No emotion, no outburst, just empty. Emma saw it too. She didn't say anything at first, just put her hand on mine. I told her I needed to send one thing. I opened WhatsApp from her phone. She was still in the group and typed a single message, "Enjoy it while it lasts." Then I opened my laptop. Smith and Rowe Logistics wasn't just my dad's company. I'd spent the last 6 years turning it into something real. We were co-owners, but I was the one who got us online, landed the Walmart contract, automated half the logistics. I'd set up the dual signature protocol for transactions over $10,000. He didn't even know how to use it. I logged in and removed my name from the business registration, transferred my shares into a holding pattern that froze them. And most importantly, I froze the payroll account. No withdrawals without my sign-off. Payroll was due that Friday. I flew under the radar. Didn't say anything. Let the silence speak for itself. A week later, I got a call from an unknown number. Didn't answer. Voicemail from Dad's CPA. Apparently, the IRS had flagged some discrepancies. Missing documentation, unpaid state tax from 2 years back. And the funny part, without me, they couldn't produce half the financial records they needed. That evening, I heard the knocking before I even reached the front door. 20 minutes non-stop. I didn't answer right away. I made him wait. When I opened the door, he was standing there red-faced and sweating like he'd sprinted through hell. And the first thing he said, "What did you do?" I let the silence hang there for a few seconds. He was expecting me to flinch, to defend myself, maybe even apologize. I just leaned on the door frame and waited. He stepped forward like he was about to walk in. I didn't move. "You froze the damn payroll. Do you know what you've done?" I nodded. "Yeah, I know exactly what I've done." He kept talking like that meant he'd get somewhere. Said the drivers were threatening to walk. The warehouse crew already had. That 2 clients were demanding penalties from missed deadlines. Said the accountant couldn't even file because my credentials were tied to the online reporting. Then he dropped the one thing he thought would shake me. "The IRS called this morning. They're reviewing 5 years of returns. 5. They think we've been hiding income. If you don't fix this, we're all going down." All that word hit different. We're all going down. I reminded him that all didn't include the one guy they kicked out of the family chat on his wedding day. That all apparently meant everyone who could make it to Hawaii and smile for the camera while pretending I didn't exist. He tried to say it wasn't personal, that it was just a bad time and they needed space. "You needed space from my wedding?" That shut him up for a second. He shifted to anger real fast. Said I was being petty, acting like a child, throwing away everything we built. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. He weighed it once, then tossed it on the floor between us. It was a copy of a document I signed 3 years ago, something buried in the early partnership filings, a clause I'd forgotten. It gave him some partial rights to override financial freezes under specific conditions, but those conditions required proof of negligence or intentional harm. He was going to try and say I sabotaged the company, that I acted with malice. He was bluffing, but it was enough to make the next few days interesting. By Monday, his lawyer had sent a cease and desist. By Tuesday, I'd replied through mine with a detailed audit of every financial decision I'd made since joining, including the ones I flagged over the years, several of which bordered on tax fraud, and all of which I had screenshots of. I didn't tell Emma most of it. She knew the outline, but I kept the stress off her. We had just gotten back from the honeymoon, and I wanted her to have at least a few days of peace before my family's mess leaked into our new life. On Wednesday, Mom texted for the first time in 2 months. "Can we please talk? This is getting out of hand." No apology, no explanation, just a soft little olive branch thrown like a used tissue. I didn't respond. But by Thursday, the game changed because that's when the CPA started calling me directly. Quietly, said the IRS wasn't just looking into the business. They were looking into Dad's personal finances, offshore accounts, a fake vendor, something tied to Caleb. The IRS wasn't just sniffing around. They were hunting, and I hadn't even lifted a finger yet. The call came while Emma and I were finishing up lunch. We'd been sorting out thank you notes at the dining table. And for the first time since the wedding, it felt like things were beginning to settle. We were joking about whose handwriting was worse when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I stepped away and answered. It was Richard, the family business's CPA, a guy I'd spoken to maybe twice in 6 years, and never directly unless something was wrong. He didn't waste time. "David, listen. I know you're not involved anymore, but you need to be aware of what's happening. His voice was clicked sharp. I didn't even ask how he got my number. I just listened. Turns out when I froze the payroll account, it did more than bounce a few paychecks. It disrupted a transaction that was mid-transfer. One flagged for an audit by the bank's compliance team. The account was under a shell vendor supposedly providing fleet software maintenance, but that vendor didn't exist. The address was a mailbox store in Nevada and the name on the vendor's founding documents? Caleb. That's when things started clicking together. Why Caleb was always so casually involved in the business. Why he never had to explain what he actually did. I asked Richard how bad it was. He paused, then said the IRS had now escalated it to a criminal investigator. They weren't just looking at one transaction. They were digging into the last 5 years. Apparently, my withdrawal had exposed the chain of inconsistencies, phony invoices, inflated contracts, undeclared foreign income, and my father had used my digital signature on several documents I hadn't even seen. I hung up and sat with it for a while. I could have walked away right there, watched them burn, but I still had control over the backup server, the one I set up for full financial transparency. Every email, contract, invoice, and approval was stored there. And without my password, no one could access it. I didn't even have to delete anything. Just locked the system remotely. Emma saw me working and asked if something was wrong. I told her we were past the point of fixing it now. Later that evening, I got a text from Aunt Jody. Your dad's in a spiral. Said the IRS called again. Caleb hasn't slept. Your mom's freaking out. It didn't feel satisfying. Not yet. It just felt inevitable. Then around 9 p.m., I heard a knock. I knew it was him before I even looked. Dad stood there. Same suit from last week. Hair disheveled like he'd run his hands through it all day. He didn't wait for me to invite him in. Just shoved a thick envelope into my chest. Read it. You're not innocent in all this either. I stayed at the door and opened it slowly. Inside were printed emails, snippets of messages between me and a logistics client from 2 years ago. My name was on the approval line of a large shipment contract, but I remember that deal. I signed off on a standard delivery quote. He was the one who modified the invoice later to inflate the delivery cost and hide extra funds. He leaned in and said, if the IRS sees those emails out of context, they won't just come after him. They'll come after me, too. He thought that would scare me, that I'd drop everything, log back in, unfreeze the accounts, and help them fix the mess. I didn't even blink. Good luck with that, I said. You altered those numbers, not me. His tone shifted. He tried appealing to me then. Said if I came back now, we could clean it up together. Said it's still a family business, that they made a mistake missing the wedding, but we can move past that. That was the first time he even mentioned it. And he thought that would be enough. That one vague mention of abandoning me on the most important day of my life would somehow make this all okay. I just shook my head. You burned that bridge. Now you're mad the fire's spreading. He stood there for a second longer like he was about to say something else. Then he turned and walked down the driveway. I shut the door and locked it. Not for safety, just to make a point. The next morning, I got an email from our former legal counsel. Apparently, my dad was trying to offload shares of the company to a third party in a panic sale to raise liquid cash. But he couldn't. My name was still tied to every major asset. And now, so was the investigation. I expected fallout, angry texts, threats, maybe even a desperate voicemail from my mom trying to patch things up. What I didn't expect was to hear from someone who hadn't spoken to me in over a decade. Friday morning, I got an email from a name I hadn't seen since high school. Uncle Grant, my dad's estranged younger brother. He'd been pushed out of the business back when I was still in college. The story I was always told was that he mismanaged funds and caused problems with the board. His email was short. I heard what's happening. I was waiting for someone to finally see it. If you want the whole picture, meet me. I have everything. I didn't reply at first. I didn't even know what to make of it. Emma urged me to go. Said, maybe it would help at the very least to understand what I was really up against. So I met him at a diner 2 towns over. He looked older than I remembered, but he didn't seem bitter, just tired. He slid a manila folder across the table before our coffees even arrived. Inside were copies of old bank transfers, emails, and one particular document that made my stomach turn. It was a buyout agreement dated 8 years ago with my dad's signature and Uncle Grant's. The reason for the buyout? Not mismanagement, not failure, but silence. Apparently, Uncle Grant had discovered that Dad and Caleb had been funneling extra revenue from warehouse leases into a side business. A private shell under Mom's name that bought and flipped commercial trucks at inflated prices, mostly to our own company. It was a full-circle scam, bleeding the business dry while lining their personal accounts. When Grant found out, Dad offered him a payout. On one condition: he'd vanish and never speak about it again. He took the deal but kept the paperwork just in case. Now, with the IRS circling and the walls closing in, he figured it was time someone else knew. I took everything, scanned it, backed it up twice. Then, I thanked him and left. The next day, the legal team for Smith and Rose sent me a request to urgently attend a mediation call. They were hoping to settle everything quickly, quietly. Offer me a full buyout of my shares in exchange for releasing access to the locked accounts and servers. I ignored the message. That same afternoon, Emma came home with news of her own. While shopping downtown, she ran into one of the warehouse workers, Diego, a guy who'd been with the company since I joined. He told her something strange. Apparently, my dad had told the employees that I was the reason no one was getting paid, that I'd sabotaged the system after a fight with my brothers. He was trying to turn them against me, said I was bitter and unstable. I didn't even get mad. I just laughed because by Sunday, something happened that none of them expected. The IRS didn't just freeze the business accounts. They froze the personal ones, too. My dad's, my mom's, and Caleb's. All pending formal investigation. No access, no transfers, no warnings. Emma and I were having dinner when I got the alert. All 3 of them were on a list of financial holds issued as part of the wider fraud probe. They were locked out of their money. Everything. I set my fork down, leaned back, and smiled. The house of cards wasn't just falling now. It had collapsed. Monday morning, I woke up to 33 missed calls. 9 from Dad, 10 from Mom. The rest split between Mark and Caleb. Not a single voicemail, just silent panic. By noon, I'd received 2 emails from the IRS requesting copies of the backup financial records, specifically the archived correspondence, contracts, and vendor activity that only I could access. I didn't respond yet. I wanted them to sweat. That evening, I got an unexpected knock. Emma checked the peephole first. It was my mother. I hadn't seen her since Christmas 2 years ago. She always preferred to play the quiet partner in family disasters. Passive, smiling, never directly responsible. But this time, she was the one standing on our doorstep, gripping her purse like it was the last stable thing in her life. She asked to come in. Emma left the room. We sat in silence for a few seconds, and then she launched into a rehearsed apology. She said she didn't know the full story, that she never agreed to skip the wedding, that Dad had convinced her it would be less tense if they just went away for the weekend. She insisted she tried to call. I told her she could have tried harder. Told her I'd seen the group photo, the one with the caption about the family finally being whole. She shifted gears fast. Said they were in trouble. That the IRS freeze meant they couldn't pay their mortgage, their credit cards, even their groceries. She said Dad was falling apart. That Caleb had a breakdown and that if I didn't help, everything we built, all the years we spent building the company would be destroyed. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. We know about the emergency fund. I froze. That was something Emma and I had set up years ago. A separate investment account under my name tied to a trust. Not even part of the business. We kept it off the books. Only a few people knew it existed. How? I asked. She hesitated. Your father may have pulled some bank records from back when you two had joint authorization. He thinks that money should go back into the business. You wouldn't have had it if it weren't for the company. She said it like it was logical, like she believed it. I stood up. I don't care what he thinks. That money is ours. You people left me on my wedding day. I owe you nothing. She begged. Literally said the words, please. And then she tried one last card. If you don't help, your father will go public. Say you doctored the books, that you orchestrated this. I laughed. She flinched. They were cornered, drowning, and now they wanted to drag me down with them. I told her I had no intention of stopping the investigation, that the only reason I hadn't already sent the full archive to the IRS was because I was waiting to see how far they were willing to fall. She stood there for a moment, stunned, then left without another word. The next morning, I submitted everything. The emails, the backup files, the transaction logs, Uncle Grant's documents, and then I closed the laptop and took Emma out for brunch. Let them burn. 3 days after I submitted the archive to the IRS, the investigation became official. Emma was the one who told me it hit the news. Family-owned freight company under federal audit for multi-year tax evasion. They didn't name names, but anyone local who knew the Smiths could do the math. Friends started texting. A few old coworkers reached out, some in shock, some just to say they always knew something was off. That night, I got the final message I'd ever read from my father. It was a screenshot of a legal letter drafted by his attorney accusing me of breaching a fiduciary duty, damaging the company, and putting the entire family under emotional and financial duress. He was threatening a civil lawsuit unless I withdrew the documents. I blocked the number, no hesitation. Then I logged into the company portal, one of the few things still left active. And I deleted my profile. My name, my email, everything. Not as revenge. Not out of spite, just because it was time. Mark tried to call a few hours later. He left a voicemail this time. Said I'd gone too far. Said I should have handled this inside the family. Caleb emailed me a paragraph saying I had misinterpreted the situation and we could have had a conversation. Funny, no one wanted a conversation on my wedding day. Not a single one of them showed up. Not one message. But now, when their accounts were frozen and their house was under audit, they found their voices. I didn't reply. They all made their choices. I cut contact completely. I didn't block them out of spite. I just didn't want any more of their poison bleeding into what I built with Emma. We moved 3 months later out of state, new town, clean start. The emergency funds stayed untouched. I started consulting again privately. Emma went back to teaching. Our life became quiet, stable, real. And Jody and a few other relatives stayed in touch. Some friends from the wedding would still bring it up when we met for dinner, how no one could believe what my family did. How low it was to choose a vacation over their own son's wedding. Everyone agreed on the same thing, that people like that only care about control. And when they lose it, they lose everything. It's been nearly a year now. Every so often, I still get a spammy-looking letter from a law firm or a distant cousin reaching out just to catch up. I ignore them. Emma and I have a new home, a new rhythm. We talk about kids now. We travel when we want to. We laugh a lot more than I ever thought was possible. I'm not angry anymore, just done. Sometimes when people ask if I miss them, I tell the truth. I missed the version of them I thought they were, but that version never showed up. Not when it mattered. And now neither will I. The update. 6 days after I thought it was all behind me, I got an email that made me stop cold. It was from the IRS. Not a notice, not a request, a thank you. One of the senior agents on the case had sent a formal statement acknowledging the value of the information I provided. I wasn't expecting it. It said the backup records I submitted had led to the discovery of multiple offshore accounts tied to fraudulent vendor payments. And not just under my dad's name. There were others, associates. A couple of names I recognized from business meetings years ago. 2 of them had already fled the country, but the email ended with something unexpected. We will be issuing a subpoena for testimony. Based on the records, we believe you were unaware of these activities, but your cooperation may assist in building the broader case. I reread that line twice. This wasn't just about my dad anymore. This was bigger. Later that afternoon, Emma found something in the mail. A thick envelope. No return address, but it was hand-delivered. No stamp, no label. Inside were 2 things. A letter from Caleb and a flash drive. His letter was rambling, apologetic in parts, desperate in others. He said Dad had gone off the rails, that he was trying to shift the blame to anyone he could, that he pressured Caleb into setting up the fake vendor accounts, that Mom knew more than she let on, but never said a word because she was scared of losing everything. He said he didn't want to go down with them, that he was sorry for what happened at the wedding, that he knew I'd never forgive him. But if the flash drive helped balance things out, then maybe one day I'd understand. I plugged it into a throwaway laptop. It was a dump of internal emails, voice memos, spreadsheets, and even a few video clips. One of them had Dad on a call with someone overseas laughing about how the kid signs whatever I put in front of him. That was me. Another showed him explaining to Caleb how to split vendor payments into smaller batches to avoid banking thresholds. It was airtight. I sent everything to the IRS contact with a short message, "One more gift." That night, I sat with Emma on the porch. We didn't say much, just watched the sky darken, the breeze roll in, and I realized something. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was removal. A final purge of everything that tried to twist what should have been the best day of my life into a memory of betrayal. Now it was just over, and this time for good. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I came for Christmas. My chair was gone, replaced with a sign, "Reserved for special guests." My sister's boyfriend sat in my spot. My mom said, "He's been really supportive." I nodded, took a cookie, and left without a word. 40 minutes later, my aunt texted, "Thank God he didn't make a scene." That night, I froze the emergency card they all used. By morning, 83 messages lit up the group chat, and then panic calls to me, "Don't be selfish." I landed in Boston 3 days before Christmas. Cold air hit me like a wall when I stepped out of the airport, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. I'd made this trip every year since I moved to Chicago. No matter how complicated life got, I never missed it. My mom still lived in the house we grew up in. Same creaky floors, same fake tree we'd been using since 2003. I figured it would be like every other year. Overcooked ham, predictable arguments, and me quietly leaving after a few days with a headache and a suitcase full of laundry I didn't want to do. But this time, I walked in and knew immediately something was off. The smell of cinnamon candles and burnt cookies was the same. Christmas music was playing on a too loud Bluetooth speaker. But when I stepped into the living room, I stopped cold. My chair was gone. That chair had been in the family for decades. Ugly as hell, some faded green floral pattern that didn't match anything else in the house. But everyone knew it was mine. On Christmas Eve, I always sat in that chair. It was a thing like the dumb ornaments or Dad falling asleep during It's a Wonderful Life. It just was. Now it had a laminated sign taped to it, "Reserved for special guests." And there he was, Derek, sitting in my chair like he'd been born there, sipping from a bottle of Sam Adams like he paid the mortgage. My sister's boyfriend, who had somehow managed to go from just hanging out to suddenly being invited to family holidays and talking like he had authority on how the mashed potatoes should be made. He didn't even glance up, just kept scrolling through his phone. I looked around the room. No one seemed to think anything of it. My mom walked in behind me and said it like she was giving me good news. "He's been very supportive." That's all she said. No greeting, no welcome. No, "Hey, how was your flight?" I didn't respond. I just walked over to the kitchen, grabbed a sugar cookie from the tray I knew had come from a box, and walked right back out the door. I got in the car and drove without any real destination. I ended up parked outside a Dunkin' on Route 1, eating that dry-ass cookie and thinking about how stupid I was to even come. That's when I got the text from my aunt. Thank God he didn't make a scene. I stared at it for a good minute. A scene? As if quietly realizing I'd been bumped down the family ladder and choosing not to speak counted as some miracle. None of them had a clue. I'd spent money I didn't really have to be there. Bought gifts for everyone, nothing flashy, but thoughtful. A scarf for Mom. She's always cold. Dad got that signed Red Sox cap he once said he regretted not buying at Fenway. Emily, my sister, had mentioned her earbuds stopped working, so I got her a decent pair. I even wrapped everything myself. I'd also spent the last few months paying off the family emergency card. They used it like it was free money. Uber rides, takeout, groceries when someone forgot their wallet. And it was always me who picked up the bill quietly because nobody else could or would. So that night, after everyone went to bed, I went into the kitchen, opened the junk drawer, and dug through old receipts and pens that didn't work until I found the card. the one they all used like air. I filled a plastic cup halfway with water, dropped the card in, and stuck it in the freezer behind the peas and some mystery meat from 2021. I didn't sleep well. It didn't matter because by morning, chaos had started. 83 messages in the group chat. Started innocent, Emily asking who used the card last. Mom wondering if it had been stolen. Dad texting some nonsense about updating the PIN. Then the tone changed. Who touched the card? Where's the backup? We have guests here. What are we supposed to do now? And finally, Mike, don't be selfish. Selfish? I put the phone down, went downstairs, and made myself coffee while I listened to the distant sounds of my family unraveling over a frozen piece of plastic. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I wanted them to feel it. Just a taste. That was just the beginning. They had no idea how much I'd done to keep this house of cards from collapsing. And if they wanted to act like I didn't matter, they were about to find out what it was like when I stopped pretending I did. The rest of Christmas Eve was exactly what you'd expect when a group of self-centered people is forced to function without their usual conveniences. There was shouting about who was supposed to go get groceries. My dad claimed he couldn't go because he'd already taken his pills. My mom started pulling random freezer food out like we were preparing for a blizzard. Emily sulked on the couch because she couldn't dash anything. And Derek, still in my chair, was loudly suggesting that someone just figure it out. I didn't lift a finger. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and watched it all play out. For once, I didn't feel guilty. I'd always been the fixer, the guy who paid the bills quietly, solved the small emergencies before anyone noticed they were happening. The more I helped, the more they expected. Nobody ever asked how I was doing or if I could afford it. They just took like it was owed. Then around noon, my grandfather showed up. My dad's dad. Old school kind of guy. He never got involved unless he felt something had gone seriously wrong. He walked in, took one look around the room, and sat down next to me without a word. We both watched my mom trying to microwave a rock-solid ham. He nudged me with his elbow and said quietly, "They're eating themselves." I didn't say anything. He sat back, cracked his knuckles, and finally muttered, "They won't say sorry. Not one of them. Not until they need something bad enough." He turned his head and looked me dead in the eyes. "You want to teach them something? Don't yell. Don't fight. Just stop helping. Make 'em feel it." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was exactly what I was already doing. He stood up to leave but added, "When they hit the wall, and they will, then you decide who's worth a damn. Until then, let it burn." Christmas dinner was late. They pulled together some awful meal. Hot dogs, canned beans, and stale bread. Nobody mentioned the gifts I brought. I waited to see if anyone would. Nothing. Derek complained about the food. Mom apologized to him. Emily sat next to him like some smug passenger on the Titanic, pretending everything was fine as the water poured in. So that night, I made another quiet decision. I opened my laptop in the guest room and logged into my online banking. I'd been paying Emily's rent for the last 4 months. She'd lost her job in July but didn't want to move back in, so I stepped in. $1,100 a month. She swore it was temporary. I believed her. Or maybe I just didn't want to see her fail. I canceled the automatic payment just like that. No warning. She was about to find out how supportive Derek really was when rent bounced in 5 days. I closed the laptop and slept better than I had in months. They wanted to pretend I didn't matter. They were about to find out how much I did. New Year's Eve passed without a word from me. I turned my phone off around 9 o'clock, ordered takeout, and watched movies alone in my apartment. There was something beautiful about the quiet. No fake toasts, no forced smiles. Just me finally free from a cycle I hadn't even realized I was locked in for years. Back in Boston, I heard the party went on without a hitch. Emily had posted pictures of some half-hearted get-together with a few friends at our parents' house. She looked happy enough, wearing one of the sweaters I'd given her last year. No mention of Derek. No trace of him in her photos, not even in the background, like he'd been scrubbed out. I figured they were buying time, letting the tension cool, hoping I'd forget. But something had shifted, and deep down they knew it. The silence lasted weeks. No messages, no calls. Not even from the aunts who usually couldn't help but poke their noses in. I thought maybe they were giving me space. Maybe trying to prove they could function without me. Then in mid-February, reality hit. It started with my mom's car. She drove a 15-year-old sedan with the check engine light permanently on. This time it wasn't something minor. The transmission gave out in the middle of a grocery run, and she had to get it towed. The repair bill, $3,800. My dad was still working his job at the shipping depot, but hours had been getting cut. He wasn't saying it out loud, but everyone in the family chat had noticed he'd stopped mentioning overtime. Emily, now living back home, had no job. She was supposedly freelancing, which, from what I could tell, meant watching a lot of YouTube tutorials about digital marketing and never actually applying to anything. Before, they would have come straight to me, but this time they didn't. Instead, they tried to be sneaky. My Uncle Mark texted me with a screenshot. My mom had messaged him asking if he could ask me for help because it might go better coming from someone else. Mark, to his credit, shut it down. He told her point blank, "If you need help, talk to your son yourself, and maybe think about how you treated him before asking." I could practically hear the awkward silence through the screen. Later that week, my cousin Ryan reached out, not to ask me for anything, but to give me a heads up. Apparently, my parents had started floating the idea of a family fundraiser. I wasn't invited. They thought maybe some of the cousins could pitch in. Ryan told them if they couldn't apologize to me like adults, they shouldn't expect anyone else to clean up their mess. That was the moment I realized how different things had become. The family wasn't siding with them anymore. People were tired. Everyone had stories. Times they'd helped out. Times they were taken for granted. And now that someone, me, had finally broken away, it was like a dam had burst. Still, my parents held out as long as they could. Then finally I got the text. It was from my mom. A wall of text so long I had to scroll. It started with guilt. "After all we've done for you." Then came the drama. "I can't sleep at night worrying about how things turned out." Then the twist. "We're not perfect, but you turning your back on us has been the hardest part of all." Not one apology, not one acknowledgement of what actually happened. Just manipulation dressed up as vulnerability. I waited a few minutes. Then I typed my reply slowly. "Find a better job, Mom." That was it. I didn't offer money. I didn't soften it with an emoji or a joke. I just hit send. The typing bubble popped up, then disappeared. She never replied. 2 days later, I found out they tried to get a short-term loan and were denied. My dad had to borrow a car from a neighbor just to get to work. Emily went back to posting quotes about loyalty and betrayal like she was living in a soap opera. Nobody was helping them. Not this time. And I felt nothing. No guilt. No urge to jump in. Because sometimes people need to hit the wall. Sometimes they need to live in the mess they made with no one left to sweep it up behind them. This was the life they built. They could figure out how to survive in it without me. By the time March rolled in, the group chat was barely breathing. No more links to dog videos from Aunt Melissa. No more Sunday brunch photos from my cousin Leon. Not even my mom's usual forwarded chain prayers. Just silence. It was like I'd thrown a wrench into the machine, and nobody knew how to start it up again. And honestly, I didn't miss it. They'd all been feeding off each other for so long. Taking, pretending, avoiding. That when one piece fell out, the rest just sat there, blinking at the empty space. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. I still heard things, though. Even when you walk away from family, you don't walk away from information. My Uncle Mark would send me a line or two here and there, usually in the form of a sarcastic observation. "Your mom tried to use 2 expired coupons and a scratch ticket to pay for almond milk. Your dad told everyone he was cutting back on driving. For the environment. Emily says she's writing a memoir now." At first, I thought he was just trying to make me laugh. But eventually I realized he was also watching them sink. Derek was long gone. Word was he'd moved to New Hampshire and started dating a Pilates instructor. My sister never mentioned him again. Instead, she'd taken up vague posting. Cryptic captions, blurry selfies with the lyrics to sad indie songs, hashtags like hashtag starting over and hashtag loyalty is rare. like she was starring in a personal drama nobody was paying to watch. After months of freeloading in her apartment, she was now back in her childhood bedroom. She hated it. Posted a photo of her window one night with the caption, "Feels like a cage." But the only cage she'd been locked in was one she built herself, brick by brick, with other people's money and entitlement. My mom, meanwhile, was doing everything to pretend things were fine, posting photos of homemade dinners, shots of her old recipe book open on the counter, captions about making do, and the joy of simplicity. But people in the family were noticing. The car still hadn't been fixed. My dad wasn't showing up to the usual weekend get-togethers. Their house looked darker in photos, like they were trying to save electricity. It wasn't poverty. Not yet. But it was a kind of quiet desperation. They'd spent years convincing themselves they were the center of gravity. And now, without their invisible support system, everything was drifting. Then came the tipping point. It started with my cousin Danielle, who I hadn't spoken to in nearly a year. She called me out of nowhere. Said she'd run into my parents at the local market. My mom was asking a cashier to check the balance on a prepaid debit card. My dad was standing behind her holding one item, just a loaf of bread. Danielle didn't sound judgmental, just surprised. "They look tired," she said. "Like aged." I said, "Thanks for letting me know," and hung up. Then I sat there with that image in my head for longer than I wanted to admit. And still, I didn't go back because it wasn't about money. It wasn't about groceries or cars or rent or cards. It was about them refusing, again and again, to see what they'd become. And when it finally came back to bite them, they acted like victims of bad luck instead of the authors of their own downfall. Then Easter came. I got a text from Emily, just a photo of the dining room table. 3 plates, no decorations, a cracked gravy boat in the center like a relic. No caption, just the photo. Then a minute later, another one from my mom. "You're always welcome here." That was it. No apology, no reflection, no acknowledgement. They didn't want me back because they missed me. They wanted the old rhythm, the comfort of someone who cleaned up after them while they kept stepping in the same mess. But I wasn't that person anymore. I stared at the screen for a while, then locked my phone. Easter passed, and I went for a walk along the lake. I grabbed coffee, ran into a friend, made loose plans for dinner. Nobody demanded anything. Nobody asked for favors. Nobody tried to guilt-trip me with cold ham and an empty chair. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost at my own family table. I felt like a person, a whole one. By May, the air in my life felt different, lighter. For the first time in years, my calendar wasn't littered with last-minute family crises or guilt-loaded obligations disguised as dinners. No texts asking for money, no calls pretending to check in just to slip in a favor. It was just peace. And I didn't realize how badly I needed it until I had it. They hadn't stopped trying though, just changed tactics. My dad started emailing me articles. Titles like, "The Importance of Family Bonds," or "Don't Let Grudges Ruin Your Life." He'd add one-liners at the bottom like, "You're still our son no matter what," as if that line hadn't been used before every time they needed something. My mom sent pictures of the backyard, her garden, Emily holding a tray of burned muffins, as if their life was just as warm and whole without me. There was no apology, no real message, just a hint. "Look how normal things are here. Don't you want to come back?" They didn't understand. They never did. This wasn't about a grudge. It was about self-preservation. About the slow rot of one-sided loyalty. About how many times I'd been the only adult in the room while the rest of them lived like emotional toddlers, waiting for someone else to mop up the mess. Then, in June, Emily snapped. The message came late on a Tuesday night. Started calm, almost polite. Then it turned. She accused me of being selfish, of punishing people who were just trying their best, of letting money go to my head. She said Derek had been trying to bond with me and that I pushed him away. Said if I had a problem, I should have come to her instead of making everyone feel small. I didn't feel angry, just hollow. I sent her one line, "For months of rent, Emily." She didn't respond. Neither did anyone else. After that, everything just stopped. My mom's garden photos ended. My dad's emails dried up. No one messaged in the group chat. I muted it months ago, but I checked it out of habit once or twice. Still silent, like the whole family had agreed to pause, unsure if pressing play again was even worth it. That's when I knew this wasn't a phase. It was the ending, not a loud one. No slammed doors, no drawn-out confrontation, just absence. The kind that's louder than shouting. I didn't feel triumphant. This wasn't revenge. It was just the quiet that comes when you stop waiting for people to change and start building something of your own. That summer, I took time for myself. Visited a cabin in Vermont. Flew to Austin for a weekend music festival. Reconnected with people who knew me outside of family roles. People who didn't expect anything from me except honesty and time. I started running again, cooking for myself, remembering how to live without carrying anyone else's weight. And sometimes I think about that house in Boston, about the old green chair, the crooked picture frames, the kitchen drawer full of expired batteries and restaurant menus. I wondered if they still kept my seat by the fireplace open. If the reserved for special guests sign was still tucked somewhere nearby. I kind of hoped it was. Not because I missed it, but because it might remind them that I wasn't just a guest. I was the one holding it all together until I finally stopped. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Parents pretended to cancel family vacation. Let's do it sometime, they said. Okay, I said, and was at home. The next day, I saw my sister post, "All family is on vacation together." I was looking forward to this trip more than anything. A Christmas vacation in the Maldives with my family. What could be better? We had planned everything down to the last detail. Flights were booked months in advance, hotels were confirmed, and we had even talked about the activities we wanted to do together. Snorkeling, boat rides, just relaxing on the beach. It was going to be perfect. The plan was simple. We'd all meet at my parents' house the night before to go over the final details. I packed my bags, double-checked my passport, and even took the day off from work. This wasn't some last-minute thing. We'd all been talking about it for months. I even helped pay for some of it because my sister and her husband, Jake, were struggling financially. That night, I was just about to head over when I got a text from my mom. "Hey honey, something came up. We have to cancel the trip. Sorry. We'll do it another time." I froze. What? We had planned this for so long, and now they were canceling at the last minute? I called immediately. My dad picked up. His voice was calm, too calm, like it was no big deal. I asked what happened, and he gave me some vague excuse about unexpected business and how they just couldn't go right now. I didn't get it. They were both retired. What business? I asked about Emma and Jake. Were they canceling too? There was the slightest pause, almost nothing, but I caught it. Then he said, "Yeah, they're not going either." I was frustrated, but I tried not to show it. Maybe something really serious had come up. I asked if they were okay, if something had happened, but he brushed it off. He just said it was bad timing and we'd reschedule. I sighed. What could I say? I was disappointed, but I wasn't going to argue. I said, "Okay," hung up, and started unpacking my bag. The next morning, I woke up, made some coffee, and scrolled absent-mindedly through my phone. That's when I saw it. A message from Emma. At first, I thought I was seeing things. A picture of the ocean, crystal clear water stretching endlessly under a bright blue sky, white sand, palm trees swaying in the breeze. Then a second image. My sister, Jake, and my parents, all together, smiling, drinks in hand. The caption, "The whole family on vacation together." I felt my whole body go cold. I blinked, reading it over and over, waiting for my brain to catch up. My stomach churned. My heart was pounding. I could hear my blood rushing in my ears. They were in the Maldives. They were gone without me, and they had lied right to my face. I just sat there, staring at my phone, trying to process what I was seeing. My parents, my sister, Jake, all of them on the trip we had planned together, the one they canceled at the last minute, the one I was supposed to go on. I flipped through the pictures again. They weren't just there. They were having the time of their lives. Sunset dinners, cocktails by the pool, boat rides. Emma even posted a video of my dad laughing as he tried to balance on a paddleboard before falling into the water. My mom commented, Best family trip ever. With a bunch of heart emojis. I felt sick. I didn't even know what to do. Should I call her? Text Emma? Comment below the post? I wanted to explode, but I didn't. I just locked my phone and sat in silence. There must be some explanation, I told myself. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe they thought I couldn't make it for some reason. Maybe. No, there was no way. They were lying. They looked me in the face and they lied. And for what? Why leave me behind? I tried to push it out of my mind, but the anger sat in my chest like a weight. Christmas Eve came, and I spent it alone in my apartment. I had already taken time off work for the trip, so I had nothing to do, no plans, no family, no one to be with. The only person who came by was my friend Ryan, who stopped by that night to check on me after I told him what had happened. We had a few drinks, watched a stupid Christmas movie, but after he left, it was just me. 11 days. 11 days of scrolling past her vacation posts. 11 days of my mom gushing about how magical the Maldives were. 11 days of them pretending I didn't exist. When they got back, I wasn't just angry. I was done. I texted Emma, told her to meet me at Mom and Dad's house that night. No explanations. She just replied, "Okay." When I arrived, they were all there, sitting in the living room as if nothing had happened. My mother smiled when she saw me. My dad nodded. Emma looked up from her cell phone. Jake barely looked at me. It was like I was the one who had been gone for 11 days. I sat down, looked at them, took a breath. Then I asked the only thing that mattered. Why? My mom blinked. Why what, honey? I almost laughed. Almost. Why did you lie to me? Why did you tell me the trip was canceled and then go without me? The room went silent. I watched their expressions change. My mom's smile faltered. My dad exhaled through his nose as if trying to decide what to say. Emma bit her lip. Then finally my dad spoke. "Well, we just thought you'd be busy, work and all." I stared at him. I had taken time off. I had packed my bags. I was literally ready to leave when they texted me. My mom chimed in, "And we didn't want you to feel pressured to pay for Emma and Jake again. You helped them a lot, and we didn't want to burden you." My head snapped to my sister. She didn't even look at me. They thought I was busy? They didn't want me to feel burdened? So instead of asking me, you just shut me out, lied to me, left me alone for Christmas? Now Emma spoke. "It's not like that. We just thought you wouldn't mind sitting this one out. You've traveled a lot, but we've never done a trip like this." I actually felt dizzy. I had paid for most of her travels, helped her whenever she needed it, paid her rent when she and Jake were struggling, and now she was acting like I was hoarding vacations? I looked at Jake, who was still silent. He was just sitting there with his arms crossed, letting Emma and my parents handle it. I decided I was done making excuses. I leaned back, crossed my arms, and let them drop. "Well, if you can afford a vacation for 4, I guess you don't need my help anymore. I'm done paying for Emma and Jake. They're on their own now." That got her attention. My mom gasped, my dad's eyes widened. Emma's head snapped up so fast I thought she'd get whiplash. Even Jake's expression finally changed. His mouth opened as if to say something, but he didn't. Mom jumped in first. Wait, honey. You promised to help them. When we asked you, you said you'd support them." Dad nodded. "That's not fair, son. They're young, trying to get on their feet. You always said family helps family." I let out a breath. I was actually impressed. They weren't even denying what they were doing anymore. They had completely skipped over the part about betraying me and gone straight to calling me unfair. I stood up. "I have to go." I grabbed my coat and walked out. The next morning, my phone exploded. When I say my phone exploded, I mean it was like a digital war zone. Calls, texts, voicemails, even emails. Emma was the first to blow up my phone. "You're seriously cutting us off over a vacation? You're being dramatic. We didn't do anything that bad. Mom and Dad are freaking out. Thank you very much." Then Jake, "Man, let's talk. No need to make a big deal out of this." Then my mom, "Honey, please don't be rash. We love you. Let's talk as a family." And finally, my dad, who made it short, "Call me now." I ignored every one of them. Then something even crazier happened. Around noon, I got a message from my bank. A large transaction had been attempted from my account. First, I thought it was fraud. I called my bank, ready to dispute the charge, but when I asked for details, my stomach sank. It wasn't fraud. It was my sister. She had been trying to transfer money from my account to hers. I could feel my pulse in my ears. How the hell did she even have access? Then I remembered. A few months earlier, she had been in financial trouble and had asked me to help her with the rent. Since she was so bad with money, I had set up an account for her bills and given her limited access. It was supposed to be temporary, but apparently she had decided to help herself. I immediately locked everything down, changed passwords, removed her access, and blocked her from everything. Less than an hour later, my phone rang again. My parents. I finally picked it up. My mom's voice was frantic. "Harry, what's going on?" "Emma just called us sobbing, saying you froze her accounts and she can't pay the rent." I laughed. Actually laughed. She can't pay rent? Maybe she should have thought of that before she stole from me. Mom gasped. "Stealing?" She said it was all a misunderstanding. She thought you were still helping her out by transferring thousands of dollars without asking. She was desperate, Harry, and you've always helped her before. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. Not anymore. My father's voice came through, sharp and frustrated. "You're being stubborn. You know she and Jake are having problems. Is this really about the trip? Or are you just looking for a reason to leave your family?" I almost crushed my phone in my hand. I spoke slowly, making sure they heard every word. "You abandoned me. You left me alone at Christmas. You lied to me. Then Emma tried to steal from me. And I'm the one who leaves you." Silence. Then my father exhaled. "You're punishing all of us for one mistake." One mistake. I let out a bitter laugh. "You know what? You're right. It was a mistake. My mistake. I spent years being the good son, paying for everything, being responsible, helping everyone. And where did it get me? Alone at Christmas while my family celebrated without me. So yeah, I'm fixing my mistake. I'm done." I hung up before they could respond. But the mess was far from over. I thought that was the end of it. I had made my point. I was done being the family purse, done with their excuses, done with it all. But my family, they weren't done with me. The next morning, I woke up to a text message from an unknown number. "You're disgusting. After all they've done for you, this is how you repay them." I frowned. Who was this? Before I could even think about replying, another one came in. "Ungrateful little prick. Your sister needed help and you turned your back on her. I hope you rot alone." By this time, I was fully awake, my heart pounding. I had no idea who it was, but I had a hunch. Jake. I pulled up Emma's social media. Sure enough, there it was. A long, dramatic post about how her cold-hearted brother abandoned his family right after Christmas, and how she and Jake were about to lose everything because I had selfishly taken away the financial support they depended on. The comments were filled with sympathy. Friends, extended family, even some people I barely knew, chimed in with messages like, "Wow, I didn't know your brother was like that," and "Family should always come first." And then I saw it. One of my aunts had replied, asking why I would do something so harsh. Emma's answer: "He just got jealous that we went on vacation without him and decided to punish us." I actually had to put my phone down. I was furious. I had helped them for years, paid their rent when they struggled, covered their bills when they couldn't, helped Emma fix her car, paid off one of Jake's loans. And now she was making me look like the bad guy? I wasn't going to let this go. I opened the comments and typed, "Let's be clear, Emma and Jake stole from me. She tried to take thousands out of my account without my permission after lying to me and leaving me alone on Christmas. I have the bank records to prove it. You want to talk about family when you steal from your own brother? Go ahead and tell everyone the truth, Emma." I then posted screenshots of the failed wire transfer. Within minutes, the post exploded. Some people immediately switched sides and called Emma out. Others were in shock. A few people still tried to defend her, saying the family should work things out privately. But by then, the damage was done. Then a message from Emma herself appeared in my inbox. "WTF is wrong with you? Delete this now. I didn't. Instead, I texted her directly, "Don't ever contact me again." Then I blocked her. An hour later, my mother called. I answered, already knowing what was coming. Her voice was shaking. "Harry, you humiliated your sister. Why would you do this to her?" I let out a short laugh. "You mean, why would I tell her the truth? The truth that she had no problem lying about. She was desperate. She didn't know what to do. She knew exactly what to do. And so did you, when you let me pay for her and Jake for years while she never even tried to stand on her own." Mom sniffled. "You're tearing this family apart." I clenched my jaw. "No, Mom. You did it when you left me behind." I put the phone down before she could say another word. Then I blocked her too. I thought blocking them would bring me some peace, but I underestimated just how desperate my family could get when money was on the line. The next morning, I woke up to a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and after the past few days, I already had a bad feeling. I checked the peephole. It was my dad. I sighed, debating whether to just ignore it, but he knocked again, louder this time. "Harry, open up. We need to talk." I hesitated for a second, then opened the door. He walked in like he owned the place, not even waiting for an invitation. I closed the door behind him. "What do you want?" He turned to face me, arms crossed. "This has gone far enough. You're making things harder than they need to be." I almost laughed. "I'm making things harder, Dad?" Emma literally tried to steal from me. She made a mistake. A mistake? Or did she assume I'd never notice? He waved a hand, brushing it off. "Look, she's panicking. You humiliated her. You should have kept this private." "You mean I should have let her lie about me while everyone called me the bad guy?" He exhaled sharply, clearly frustrated. "This isn't about that anymore. Your mother hasn't stopped crying since you blocked her. Your sister and Jake are in serious trouble. They might lose their apartment." I folded my arms. "Not my problem." "It is your problem," he shot back. "You said you'd help them. You promised." I stared at him. "And you said we were all going on a family vacation. Guess we're both liars." His jaw tightened. "That's different." "Is it?" I asked. "Because from where I'm standing, you all made it very clear I don't matter to this family unless I'm paying for something." He scoffed. "That's not true. Isn't it?" I gestured around my apartment. "You left me alone on Christmas. You didn't even feel bad about it. You didn't even check on me. But the second Emma is in trouble, you're at my door demanding I fix it. What was this energy when I was the one you screwed over?" He didn't answer right away. For a moment, he just looked at me, his face unreadable. Then finally, he sighed. "You're right." I blinked. I hadn't expected that. "You're right," he repeated. "We should have told you. We should have invited you. We hurt you, and that was wrong." I didn't say anything, but he continued. "That doesn't change the fact that we're still family, and family helps each other no matter what." I clenched my jaw. "That's funny, because when I needed family, no one was there." His face hardened again. "You're being petty." I exhaled slowly. "No, Dad. I'm done being a bank. I'm done being used. I'm done with all of this." He took a deep breath, like he was preparing himself for something. Then he spoke, his tone shifting. "If you don't help them, they're going to be homeless." I shrugged. "They should have thought about that before blowing money on a luxury vacation." His expression darkened. "You're not as heartless as you're pretending to be, Harry. I know you. You knew me, the son who bent over backward for this family. He doesn't exist anymore." He stared at me for a long moment. Then, to my shock, he actually laughed. "You know," he said, shaking his head, "I never thought you'd be so selfish after everything we've done for you." I felt my hands curl into fists. "Done for me? Like what? Abandoning me on Christmas? Lying to me? Taking my money?" He gave me a look so cold it sent a chill down my spine. "You'll regret this." He didn't answer, just turned around and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I stood there for a moment, heart pounding. I had no idea what was coming next, but I knew it wasn't over. That conversation with my dad was the last straw. I was done. Done with the lies, Done with the guilt trips. Done with being nothing more than a wallet to them. I sat down that night and made a decision. I was getting out. A new city, a fresh start, away from all of them. I had been thinking about moving for a while anyway, but this sealed it. The next day, I started looking at jobs in other cities. By the end of the week, I had interviews lined up. A month later, I had a new job, a new apartment, and a one-way ticket out of town. And I never looked back. At first, it felt surreal, waking up in a place where no one expected anything from me. No constant calls from my mom, no emergency money requests from Emma, no guilt-tripping from my dad. Just peace. And then the unexpected started happening. One night, I ended up at a small bar near my new place, just wanting to unwind after work. I struck up a conversation with a guy next to me. Nothing deep, just casual talk. Turns out he worked in my field and knew a guy who could hook me up with an even better job. A few months later, I was making more money than I ever had before. Then one weekend, I joined a local hiking group on a whim, met some incredible people, made real friends. People who liked me for me, not for what I could do for them. And the biggest surprise, love. I met someone completely by accident. I had dropped my coffee outside a bookstore and she had laughed, handing me some napkins. One conversation led to another, then a date, then another. She was different from anyone I had ever known. Kind, independent, and completely uninterested in anything I had materially. She liked me for me. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Meanwhile, my family. They tried reaching out a few times. My mom left voicemails. Emma sent an apology text, which I ignored, and even my dad softened after a while. But by then, I had moved on. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't care. Sometimes people say blood is thicker than water, but I learned something else. Peace is priceless. And I was never giving mine up again. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My daughter said that I was a loser compared to her in-laws, so I cut her off and gave the inheritance to my son. Now she is angry and asks me to come back. I said, I never thought I'd see the day when my own daughter would call me a loser. I mean, I knew Allison had a sharp tongue sometimes, but this felt different. It wasn't just an offhand insult. It was like a statement she'd rehearsed. That word, loser, has been ringing in my head for months now. Started about a year ago, not long after Allison married Mike. He's a decent guy, I suppose, but his parents, well, they live in a different world. They bought the newlyweds a brand new car as a wedding present, a Tesla. Then, a few months later, they gave them the down payment on a condo in the city. I remember the day she told me. She called me, and at first, she sounded excited, but soon her tone changed. Why didn't you do something like this for me, Dad? She asked. I didn't know how to answer. I'd raised her and her brother, Tom, on my own after their mother died when they were young. I worked double shifts for years to make sure they had a roof over their heads and food on the table. Fancy cars and apartments weren't in the cards for us. I told her that, but it wasn't what she wanted to hear. She started listing all the things Mike's parents had done for them, saying they set the standard for what good parents should do. That stung, but it got worse. Over the next few months, she brought it up again and again. She'd call or visit, and somehow the conversation always came back to how I hadn't given her enough. You didn't even help me pay for my wedding dress, she would remind me. You didn't offer to help with the honeymoon. I tried to let it go, thinking maybe she was just blowing off steam, but the comments grew more pointed. She started comparing me to her in-laws. They're just so generous, Dad. I don't know why you can't be like them. One day, she said outright, You've never been able to give me anything I really wanted. Honestly, sometimes I think you're just a loser. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I didn't even react. What could I say? What she didn't know, and what I had been wrestling with for weeks, was that I had recently started thinking about my will. I have high blood pressure, and the doctor has warned me to take it seriously. I'm not a rich man, but I have some savings, the house, and a decent life insurance policy, enough for it to matter. I'd been trying to decide how to split everything between her and Tom, but after this conversation, I began to wonder if Allison even deserved it. She clearly didn't think much of me. Meanwhile, Tom had always been the steady one. He never asked for much and always helped me out when I needed it. It made me think hard about who would appreciate what I had to give. Little did I know that decision would send Allison into a rage I never saw coming. A few weeks after the explosion, I was sitting in my living room, going through the paperwork for my will. It wasn't a huge fortune, but it was everything I'd worked for. The house alone could be a nice boost for one of my kids. Allison had been on my mind, and not in a good way. The things she'd said lately, about me, about what I owed her, were wearing me down. But it was Tom who called that night. "Hey, Dad, are you okay?" he asked. I told him I was fine, but he could always read between the lines. "You sound stressed. Is it Allison again?" I hesitated. I didn't like to burden him with family drama, but he already knew most of it. "She just won't let up," I admitted. "She's comparing me to her parents again. You'd think I'd get used to it, but this time she called me a loser." Tom didn't respond right away. Then he finally said, "That's low. You don't deserve that." That was Tom in a nutshell. Calm, steady, and always ready to defend me. He never asked for anything, but he was always there when I needed him. When my car broke down last year, it was Tom who took a day off work to help me buy a new one. He didn't even complain when I chose a used Corolla instead of something flashier. Allison, on the other hand, had barely visited since her wedding, and when she did, it felt more like an obligation than anything else. That night, I made a decision. I decided to give Tom the bulk of my estate. The house, the savings, everything. Allison would get a small amount. It felt fair to give her something, but the majority would go to the child who had always supported me, not the one who made me feel like I was never enough. I finished the paperwork the next day. Part of me felt guilty, but a bigger part felt relieved. I figured I wouldn't say anything until it was time. I didn't want to start a fight, but Tom, God bless him, couldn't keep it to himself. A few days later, I got a call from Allison. I could tell right away that something was wrong. Her voice was tight, like she was trying to hold back anger. "Tom told me about your will," she said. "Is it true? Are you giving him the house?" I wasn't going to lie. "Yes, it's true." There was a long silence on the other end. Then she exploded. "How could you do this? I'm your daughter. I've always been there for you." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Always been there for me? Is that what you really think?" "You know what I mean," she snapped. "I'm your daughter. It's only right that I get more than Tom. He's your son, Dad. I'm your best child. You should reward me for everything I've done for you." I sat there stunned. Reward her for what exactly? This conversation was about to take a turn neither of us would forget. I didn't even know where to begin. Reward her for what? It felt like the entire history of our relationship was playing out in my head, and I struggled to find a single thing she'd done that met her sense of entitlement. "Allison," I said carefully, "you say you've always been there for me. Can you give me one example? Just one." She didn't miss a beat. "I call you all the time, don't I? I check up on you. I make sure you're okay." I almost dropped the phone. "You call me to tell me what I'm doing wrong or to complain about what I didn't give you. That's not checking up on me." She ignored me. "And who invited you to our engagement dinner?" "I did. Mike didn't even think about it, but I made sure you were there. That's loyalty, Dad. That's me being a good daughter." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You invited me to your engagement dinner, and you think that counts as loyalty?" Her tone changed, sharper now. "You're twisting my words. The point is, I've done more for you than you know. And let's not pretend that Tom deserves more than I do. What has he ever done? He's just your golden boy who never had to fight because you gave him everything." Now I was angry. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my voice calm. Tom never asked for anything, not even once. And he's always helped me when I needed it. No complaints, no strings attached. Can you honestly say the same? She scoffed. That's because you always favored him. He didn't have to ask because you handed it to him on a silver platter. You never cared for me in the same way. That was it. Couldn't hold back anymore. Do you hear yourself, Allison? You're twisting reality to fit your narrative. I gave you as much as I could. You went to college debt-free because I worked double shifts for years to make it happen. You got braces when you needed them. You went on field trips, had new clothes every year, and even had a car in high school. It wasn't a Tesla, but it was what I could afford. And now you're sitting here rewriting history because Mike's parents have more money to throw around than I ever could. For a moment, I thought she might actually back down, but instead she doubled down. None of that matters. What matters is what you're doing right now. And right now, you're cutting me out of what's rightfully mine. I couldn't believe the nerve. Rightfully yours? I repeated. This is my money, Allison. It's not yours. It was never yours. I get to decide what to do with it, and frankly, you've made it pretty easy for me. There was silence again, but it wasn't the kind that meant she was thinking. I could almost hear her anger boiling over. You're being unbelievable, she finally said. You're punishing me for having higher standards than Tom, is that it? You hate that I want more for myself. I sighed. No, Allison, I hate that you think I owe you more just because someone else gave you more. You've made it clear what you think of me, and I'm just returning the favor. That last line seemed to hit her hard. For the first time, she didn't have a quick comeback. I thought maybe that was the end of it, but then she said something I hadn't expected. You're going to regret this, Dad. You'll see. And with that, she hung up. A few weeks went by without a word from Allison. I figured she needed time to cool off, and frankly, I wasn't in any hurry to reopen that wound. Then, out of the blue, she showed up at my house one night, holding a stack of papers and looking determined. Can we talk? She asked. She wasted no time. Sitting at the kitchen table, she laid out her case like a lawyer in a courtroom. I've been thinking, Dad. This isn't fair. I'm the one who's married, the one who's starting a family. Don't you want your inheritance to help your future grandchildren? Tom doesn't need the house the way I do. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You think Tom's future doesn't matter because he's not married? I asked. She waved it off. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you need to think about who this is really going to help the most. It wasn't just entitlement. It was calculated. Every point she made was designed to justify why she deserved more. I'm not punishing you, Allison, I said firmly when she finished. But I'm not rewarding behavior that's all about taking. Her face hardened, and she stood up, gathering her papers. You'll regret this, she said as she walked out. I thought that might be the end of it. I was wrong. A week later, I received a phone call from Mike, Allison's husband. He never called me directly, so I knew something was up. Hey, Mr. Carter, he started awkwardly. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about this whole inheritance thing. Allison's really upset. I sighed. Mike, that's not something I want to discuss with you. It's between me and my kids. I understand that, he said quickly. But you have to understand where she's coming from. We're under a lot of financial pressure right now. She feels like you're overlooking everything she's done to be a good daughter. Mike, I interrupted. I'm not going to argue with you about this. Allison knows why I made the decision I did. He didn't push, but it was clear he wasn't happy. Well, I just hope you reconsider, for the sake of the family. I hung up, more irritated than anything else. But that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, I started getting texts from extended family members. Why are you cutting Allison out? One cousin asked. Another said, I hear you're giving everything to Tom. That doesn't seem fair. It didn't take long to figure out that Allison had been making the rounds, telling everyone her version of events. She made it sound like I was playing favorites, like I didn't care about her or her future. I ignored it at first, but then I got a call from my sister, Diane. What's going on with you and Allison? She asked. She says you're leaving her with nothing. Of course she says that, I replied. But she's not telling you the whole story. Diane listened as I explained, but I could tell she was uncomfortable. Look, she finally said. I'm not saying she's right, but maybe you should try to make things right. She's your daughter, after all. This was exactly what Allison wanted. Pressure from the family to make me back down. But if anything, it only made me more determined to stick with my decision. The way I saw it, Allison wasn't just upset. She was trying to manipulate me. and that only confirmed that I'd made the right decision. The family drama was exhausting, but I refused to let Allison guilt me into changing my mind. Still, it felt like the walls were closing in, and I knew she wasn't finished. One Saturday afternoon, Tom came over to help me with some yard work. We were trimming the hedges when he casually mentioned something that stopped me in my tracks. "Allison talked to a lawyer," he said. I turned to him, stunned. "A lawyer for what?" He shrugged, obviously uncomfortable. "She said something about contesting the will. I don't know how serious she is, but I thought you should know." Couldn't believe it. Contesting the will? I wasn't even dead yet, and she was already planning to fight over my estate. That night, I sat down with a cup of coffee and tried to take it all in. Part of me wanted to call her and demand an explanation, but I knew that would only escalate the situation. Instead, I called my lawyer the next morning to make sure everything was airtight. A couple of days later, Allison called. This time, there was no pretense of civility. "Tom told you, didn't he?" she said as soon as I picked up. "Told me what?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "Don't play dumb, Dad. He told you I'm considering my options." I took a long breath. "Allison, are you trying to fight me over money that isn't even yours yet? Do you hear how ridiculous that sounds?" "I'm doing what I have to do," she snapped. "If you want to treat me like I don't matter, fine. But I'm not going to sit back and let you give everything to Tom just because you like him better." "This isn't about liking someone better," I said. "It's about respect. And you've shown me time and time again that you don't respect me or anything I've done for you." She scoffed. "You think this is about respect? This is about fairness. You're punishing me for having expectations, for wanting more for myself. That's not fair, Dad." "Fair," I said, unable to keep the frustration out of my voice. "Fair would have been for you to treat me like your father, not like a bank you can cash in whenever it suits you. You made that choice, Allison, not me." She didn't say much after that, but I could feel her anger through the phone. When she hung up, I realized something important. This wasn't just about money for Allison. It was about control, and I wasn't going to let her win. For a while, things were quiet. I thought maybe Allison had finally let it go. But deep down, I knew better. She wasn't one to back down easily, especially when she thought she'd been wronged. It wasn't long before I was in for another surprise. One night, as I was going through the mail, I found a letter from Allison. It wasn't handwritten or heartfelt. It was from her lawyer. She was formally contesting the will, claiming that I was making decisions under undue influence from Tom. Couldn't believe it. Undue influence? Tom had never pressured me about anything. He didn't even know I was revising the will until I told him. But Allison painted a different picture. I immediately called my attorney. He assured me that the will was solid and that her claim had no merit. But that wasn't the point. The fact that she'd gone this far, dragging Tom and me through legal threats, was more than I could bear. Tom came over the next day, visibly upset. "She sent me a letter, too," he said, holding it up. "She's accusing me of manipulating you. Can you believe that?" I shook my head. "I don't even recognize her anymore. That's not the Allison I raised." Tom sat down, clearly struggling with his own emotions. "You know, Dad, I think she's just scared. Scared of being left out, of not being enough. That's what this is really about." "Maybe," I admitted. "But that doesn't excuse what she's doing. She's trying to hurt you, me, everyone, just to get her way." Tom nodded but didn't say much more. He didn't need to. The damage had already been done, and we both knew it. Later that week, Allison called again, her tone more subdued this time. "Look, Dad," she said. "I'm sorry it had to come to this, but you're leaving me no choice. I've been trying to talk to you, and you're not listening." "I hear you loud and clear, Allison," I said. "You are willing to destroy this family for money. That's all I need to know." Her voice cracked just a little. "That's not fair, Dad. I just want what's right." I almost felt sorry for her at that moment, but I couldn't be swayed. "What's right," I said, "is to make decisions based on how people treat each other. You may not like it, but I stand by what I've done." After that, she didn't call for a while, but I knew the battle was far from over. Weeks went by, and though I didn't hear from Allison, the tension lingered like a storm cloud. Tom checked in regularly, mostly to make sure I wasn't letting the stress get to me. My blood pressure was bad enough without all this drama. Then one night, I got a text from Diane, my sister. Allison called me. She's really upset. Says she's planning something big. You need to talk to her. I didn't respond. What was there to say? I wasn't going to beg my daughter to stop tearing the family apart over money. But the next day, I found out what Diane was talking about. Tom showed up at my house, his face set in anger. "Dad, did you see this?" he asked, handing me his phone. It was a screenshot of a post Allison had made on social media. In it, she accused me of abandoning her as a child and playing favorites with Tom. She painted herself as the victim, claiming that I deliberately cut her out of my life because I couldn't handle her success and independence. The comments were worse. People we knew, friends, extended family, weighed in. Some defended me, but others sided with Allison. "This is horrible," one person wrote. "Parents are supposed to treat their children equally." Another said, "I can't believe your dad would do this to you. Stay strong." My chest tightened as I read it all. She was dragging my name through the mud, turning our private family issues into a public spectacle. "I can't believe she'd go this far," Tom said, pacing the living room. "This isn't just about money anymore. She's trying to destroy your reputation." I sat down and stared at the floor. "I don't even know who she is anymore, Tom. How did we get here?" He didn't have an answer, and neither did I. That night, I called Diane. "What exactly did Allison tell you?" I asked. Diane hesitated. "She said she feels that you've always favored Tom, that you've never appreciated her. She thinks this is her chance to stand up for herself." "Stand up for herself?" I said, almost laughing. "By slandering me online?" "She's hurt, Carter," Diane said quietly. "But I think she's in over her head. You need to talk to her before it gets worse." I thanked Diane for the advice, but I knew I wasn't going to take it. Allison had crossed a line that I couldn't ignore. I decided then and there to go over everything in detail with my lawyer. I wasn't just protecting Tom anymore. I was protecting myself. Allison thought she was backed into a corner. She had no idea that I was already 10 steps ahead of her. A few days after the social media fiasco, Allison called. I debated not answering, but I picked up out of curiosity. Her voice was sharp, but there was a hint of desperation underneath. "Dad, you made your point, but this has gone too far. You need to fix this." I remained calm. "Fix what, Allison? You're the one who brought this out into the open. You're ruining our relationship," she shot back. "Do you really want it to end like this? Do you want people to think you're a terrible father?" It hit a nerve, but I didn't let her hear it. "Allison, you made your decision. You've spent months tearing me down, accusing Tom, and spreading lies. Now you have to deal with the consequences." She was silent for a moment. Then, in a softer voice, she said, "I am still your daughter. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I took a deep breath. "It does, Allison. It always has. But respect and trust go both ways, and you've broken both." Before she could respond, I added, "I'm done, Allison. The will is final, and so is my decision. If you want a relationship with me, you're going to have to show that it's about more than money. Until then, there's nothing more to say." I hung up, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. I'd always hoped things would end differently, but this was the path she'd chosen, and for once, I wasn't going to let her dictate the terms. Now on to the next story. Story 8. We moved in with her parents to save money, but their overbearing control, endless criticism, and invasive behavior nearly ruined our lives. The day we finally escaped was the beginning of our freedom. When my wife and I first decided to move in with her parents, it felt like the only logical choice. Financially, we were drowning. $2,000 a month in rent on top of bills, groceries, and everything else. It wasn't sustainable. The stress was taking a toll on both of us. So, when her parents offered us a room in their house, we reluctantly agreed. It wasn't bad at first. In fact, it was almost refreshing. Their house was bigger than our cramped apartment, and having more people around brought a different kind of energy. I'd never been particularly close to her parents, but they seemed friendly enough. They even cooked for us a few times, which was a nice break from our usual routine of takeout and quick meals. I remember thinking that this might actually be fun. More people meant more conversation, more shared meals, and maybe even some support in tough times. They seemed genuinely happy to have us there, and I naively believed we could make it work. After all, it wasn't forever, just long enough for us to get back on our feet. The first few weeks went smoothly. I helped around the house when I could, fixed a leaky faucet in the bathroom, and even mowed their lawn. My wife seemed relieved, and I felt like we made the right choice. But looking back, I realized that those early days were just the calm before the storm. As the weeks turned into months, the atmosphere in the house began to change. It was subtle at first, little comments here and there, questions that seemed innocent on the surface but had a sharper edge when I thought about them later. Her mother, for example, had a habit of asking about every single thing we bought. When we came home with groceries, she'd immediately ask, "Why did you get this brand of milk? Isn't it more expensive than the store brand?" Or, "Do you really need those snacks? They're so unhealthy." Her father wasn't much better. He had this way of hovering over me whenever I was doing anything around the house, offering unsolicited advice on the most basic tasks. "You're mowing the lawn wrong," he said once. "You should start at the edges, not the center." First, I shrugged it off. After all, they were helping us out. Maybe this was just their way of showing they care. But the comments kept coming, piling up like a slow drip of water that eventually becomes a flood. Even when we tried to get some quiet time in our room, it felt like we were always being watched. If I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, her dad would walk by and say, "Don't you have anything productive to do?" If we ordered takeout instead of cooking, her mother would mutter something about how we weren't saving enough money. My wife tried to ease the tension, but it wasn't easy for her either. They were her parents, and she didn't want to upset them. I could see how torn she was, caught between wanting to support me and not wanting to disrespect them. I told myself to be patient. We had a plan. Save up, get out, and move on. But as time went on, their constant hovering and need to control everything began to wear me down. As the months dragged on, the cracks in our living arrangement grew deeper. What started as minor irritation snowballed into daily battles for my sanity. It wasn't just the constant commentary anymore. It was the way their presence seeped into every corner of our lives, making me feel like a guest overstaying his welcome in a house that was never really ours. Her mother was particularly relentless. Every trip to the grocery store became an interrogation. "Why so much fruit? Are you really going to eat it all before it goes bad? And why did you buy that brand? It's overpriced." It was as if she couldn't stop herself from questioning every single decision we made. If we came back with something as simple as a frozen pizza, her eyebrows would shoot up in mock concern. "Pizza again? You two are going to gain weight, you know?" Her dad, on the other hand, acted like he was the resident expert on absolutely everything. One afternoon, I decided to fix a loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen. It was a quick, easy task, something I'd done countless times before. But as soon as he saw me with a screwdriver, he was at my side, pointing out mistakes I wasn't even making. "You're holding it wrong," he said, leaning over me. "And you're turning it too hard. You're stripping the screw." It wasn't just advice. It was condescension wrapped in the guise of helpfulness. It made my skin crawl. Then there were the conversations they would interrupt, uninvited. One night, my wife and I were sitting at the kitchen table going over our budget. It was one of those rare moments we had to ourselves, or so I thought. Out of nowhere, her mother pulled up a chair and said, "You know, if you stopped buying coffee, you'd save so much money." Her tone wasn't suggestive. It was judgmental, as if we were a couple of irresponsible kids who couldn't handle our own finances. I tried to keep my cool, telling myself it wasn't worth making waves. After all, we were guests in their home, and they were technically helping us. But no matter how much I told myself to be patient, their constant hovering and criticism wore me down. Even when I tried to avoid them, they found ways to get under my skin. When I came home late, hoping to sneak in unnoticed, Their mother would greet me at the door with a passive-aggressive smile. "Long day at work? Hope you didn't waste too much on lunch." And if I went for a jog to clear my head, her dad would comment, "Trying to get in shape? Good for you. It's about time." I started getting up early and leaving the house before anyone else was up, just to get a few moments of peace. But even that wasn't enough. Their presence loomed over everything, and the tension inside me kept building. My wife was caught in the middle. She tried to mediate, but her hands were tied. It was her parents, after all. She'd grown up with their controlling ways and was used to it in a way I could never be. I knew she felt guilty, but that didn't make it any easier for me. Every day felt like a new test of endurance, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold out. As the year wore on, the atmosphere in the house became suffocating. Every little thing my wife and I did was scrutinized. Her parents seemed to have an opinion about everything. Nothing escaped their scrutiny, and every comment felt like a veiled criticism. Her mother had a knack for asking the most annoying questions, always disguised as concern. If we spent a little extra on groceries to treat ourselves, she would inevitably ask, "Do you really think that's a good idea? You're supposed to be saving money, right?" And it wasn't just the big things. She had a comment for every mundane aspect of our lives. Even the brand of toothpaste we bought somehow became a topic of discussion. Her father, meanwhile, treated me like a project he needed to fix. Every time I did something around the house, whether it was cooking, cleaning, or fixing something, he'd find a way to criticize it. One time, I washed the car, thinking I was helping out, but instead of thanking me, he said, "You missed a spot near the wheel well. Next time, use a different soap. This one leaves streaks." The little privacy we had in our room wasn't enough to escape their constant presence. They were always in the background, always asking, always watching. Even when we had moments to ourselves, the weight of their judgment lingered. I vividly remember one day my wife and I decided to take a walk to clear our heads. We weren't gone long, maybe an hour, but when we returned, her mother was waiting at the door. "Where were you?" she asked, as if we were teenagers who had broken curfew. "You didn't tell us you were leaving." It felt like we were suffocating under their roof, but we had no immediate way out. The financial relief was the only reason we stayed, and even that was starting to feel like a bad trade-off. I told myself to persevere, to be patient, but the cracks in my resolve were growing. My wife tried to comfort me, but she was struggling as well. She hated to see me so frustrated, but at the same time she felt powerless to stop her parents from being, well, themselves. They had always been that way, and she had learned to live with it. I hadn't. As the months passed, the constant tension turned into outright resentment. Her parents weren't just intrusive. They seemed to revel in finding fault in everything we did. It wasn't enough that we contributed financially when we could, or that I helped with chores around the house. We weren't doing enough in their eyes, and they made sure we knew it. Her mother's passive aggressiveness became a daily occurrence. One afternoon, we came back from a shopping trip with a few treats for ourselves. A small cake and some ice cream. I knew we didn't need them, but it was a small indulgence to brighten an otherwise monotonous week. When her mother saw the bags, she sighed loudly. "Must be nice to have money for luxuries when you live rent-free," she said, not even bothering to hide her disdain. Her father was no better. Every time I tried to relax after a long day, he'd find a reason to call me out. Watching TV again? It must be nice to have so much free time. In my day, we didn't waste hours in front of a screen. It didn't matter that I was working full-time and helping us save up to move out. His disapproval was constant and unwavering. The worst part was how these moments added up. It wasn't just the occasional barb or complaint. It was the relentless drip of negativity that wore me down. Even when we tried to do something good, it somehow became a problem. One day, I fixed a broken step on their porch, a task they'd ignored for months. Instead of thanking me, her father criticized the way I did it. "Next time, let me do it," he said. "You used the wrong kind of nails." I felt trapped. My wife tried to keep the peace, but her efforts only went so far. She had grown up with their behavior and developed a tolerance for it that I simply didn't have. Every time I mentioned how frustrated I was, she nodded sympathetically, but she had no real solution. I began to spend more time out of the house, whether it was taking long walks or staying late at work. Anything to get away from the constant scrutiny and judgment. But even then, it wasn't enough. The moment I walked through the door, their mother or father would find something to comment on. The tension inside me was building, and I knew it was only a matter of time before something would push me over the edge. I just didn't realize how close I was to that moment. It was a Saturday afternoon when it all came to a head. My wife and I had decided to spend the day cleaning around the house, partly to contribute and partly to avoid hearing any more complaints. I vacuumed the living room while she wiped down the kitchen counters. For once, it felt like we were doing something productive together without interference. The peace didn't last long. Her mother came in, arms crossed, surveying everything like a drill sergeant. "You missed a spot under the couch," she said, pointing to an area I hadn't yet reached. "And why are you using that attachment? It doesn't even pick up properly." I gritted my teeth and nodded, trying to stay calm. "Thanks, I'll get to it," I mumbled, keeping my eyes on the vacuum. Then her dad joined in. "Why don't you take the vacuum out and clean the car mats while you're at it? They've been filthy for weeks." He wasn't asking, he was ordering. I looked at my wife, who gave me an apologetic look but said nothing. I could see how uncomfortable she was, caught between defending me and appeasing her parents. I took a deep breath and continued. But then her mother began to criticize the way my wife wiped the counters. "You're just moving the dirt around," she said. "Didn't I teach you better?" That was it. Something inside me snapped. I stopped the vacuum, stood up straight, and looked her mother in the eye. "You know, we do the best we can. We're not perfect, but we're trying. Maybe instead of nitpicking everything we do, you could just let us do things our own way." The room fell silent. Her mother looked stunned. Her father narrowed his eyes, and my wife looked like she wanted to disappear. But the silence didn't last. Her mother quickly recovered, folded her arms, and raised her voice. "This is our home," she said sharply. "If you don't like the way we do things here, maybe you shouldn't live under our roof." Felt like a slap in the face. After all we'd done to contribute and keep the peace, this was her response. I turned to my wife and said quietly, "We need to talk later." I knew in that moment that I couldn't stay here any longer. Whatever financial relief we were getting wasn't worth the constant criticism, the lack of respect, or the tension it brought to our marriage. That evening, after her parents went to bed, my wife and I sat in our small room. The tension from earlier still hung in the air, and I knew we had to have the conversation I'd been avoiding for weeks. "We can't keep doing this," I finally said, my voice low but firm. "This isn't just stressful. It's unhealthy. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells every day." She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I know," she admitted. "I feel it too, but they're my parents. It's not easy for me to just—" She trailed off, her words hanging in the heavy silence. I saw the conflict in her eyes. She hated what was happening, but these were the people who raised her. She felt torn between her loyalty to them and the life we were trying to build together. But for me, it was becoming unbearable. Their house had begun to feel less like a home and more like a prison. Everything we did was watched, judged, and criticized. It didn't matter if we worked hard or tried to help out. They always found something to complain about. The next morning, her father was at it again. I was making coffee in the kitchen when he walked in, looked at the coffee maker and sneered, "You really should stop using that brand. It's overpriced, and the taste isn't even that good." I bit my tongue and nodded, but inside I was seething. Each day brought another unnecessary comment, another reminder that nothing we did would ever be good enough for them. That day, her mother made it a point to help us with our finances. She laid out a notebook at the dining room table, listing all the ways we could save money. "Stop eating out," she said, tapping on the paper. "Cut back on groceries, and you really don't need to buy clothes or anything extra right now." It felt less like advice and more like a lecture, especially when she ended with, "If you'd been smarter with your money in the first place, you wouldn't even need to be here." That was the moment I decided we were done. I couldn't subject myself or my wife to this toxic environment any longer. After that final conversation with her mother, I knew it was time to act. Staying any longer would only further damage our relationship. I couldn't stand the thought of spending another day under their roof, feeling like we owed them something when all they gave us in return was criticism and judgment. That night, I sat down with my wife and laid it out. "We have to leave," I said, keeping my tone calm but firm. "I know it's not easy for you, but this isn't working. It's tearing us apart." She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and relief. "I was thinking the same thing," she admitted. "It's just hard. They've always been like this. But I didn't realize how much it would affect you and us when we moved in." We spent the next few nights quietly planning our move. We started looking for small apartments. Even if they weren't perfect, the priority was getting out, not finding the dream apartment. We went through our savings and realized that we could manage a deposit and a few months' rent while we figured things out. It wouldn't be easy, but anything felt better than staying where we were. In the meantime, we kept up appearances. Her parents didn't suspect a thing. I didn't want to provoke another argument, so I kept quiet, avoiding confrontation as much as possible. But every little comment they made only strengthened my resolve. One morning, their father criticized me for not mowing the lawn early enough. "The neighbors probably think you're lazy," he said with a dismissive wave. Later that same day, her mother scolded us for not sorting the laundry right. It was exhausting, and I couldn't wait to get out of there. We found a small one-bedroom apartment a few miles away. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Signing the lease felt like the first step in reclaiming our lives. With the lease signed and a moving date set, I felt the weight begin to lift. The thought of being in a space that was all ours, free from judgment and constant scrutiny, carried me through the last few weeks at her parents' house. We began to pack discreetly. We didn't want to give her parents any reason to create more tension, so we boxed up our things a little at a time and stored them neatly in our room. Most of our possessions had been put into storage when we moved in, so there wasn't much to pack except for clothes and a few essentials. Her parents, of course, remained oblivious. They were too busy micromanaging every detail of the household to notice our quiet preparations. Her mother continued her usual routine of sly comments and unhelpful suggestions. One day, when I walked in with a bag of groceries, she sighed loudly and said, "You know, if you were better with money, you wouldn't have to buy so much processed food. Cooking from scratch is cheaper and healthier." I bit my tongue, like I'd done 100 times before, telling myself it was almost over. Her father was no different. When I decided to clean out our car in preparation for the move, he appeared in the driveway and immediately started giving advice. "You're not using the right dash cleaner," he said, shaking his head as if I were incompetent. "It leaves streaks. Here, let me show you." I politely declined, explaining that I was almost done, but he lingered, watching me like a hawk as if I couldn't be trusted to clean my own car. My wife tried her best to shield me from the worst of it, but there was only so much she could do. I knew she felt guilty about the way her parents treated me, but I didn't blame her. It was just the way they were, and she'd lived with it all her life. We counted down the days until we could finally leave. Every time her parents made another critical comment or gave us unsolicited advice, it only confirmed that we were making the right decision. As our moving day approached, the atmosphere in the house seemed to grow heavier. Maybe it was just my anticipation, but even the smallest interactions with her parents felt more aggravating. Their constant hovering and unnecessary input was almost unbearable now that I knew freedom was so close. One night, as I sat quietly in our room folding clothes into boxes, her mother burst in without knocking. "What's all this?" she demanded, looking at the half-packed boxes. "We're just organizing a few things," my wife said quickly, trying to deflect. Her mother frowned but didn't push any further. Instead, she made a vague comment about how we were lucky to have space here and left the room. I could tell by her tone that she wasn't pleased, but I wasn't going to let her guilt us into staying any longer than necessary. Her father, meanwhile, found another opportunity to criticize me the day before we moved. As a final gesture of goodwill, I offered to fix a small leak under the bathroom sink. As I worked, he stood over my shoulder and made the usual comments. "You're using the wrong wrench, and are you sure you tightened it enough? It'll leak again if you don't do it right." It took everything in me not to snap. I finished the job, nodded politely when he muttered something about finally contributing, and walked away. My wife and I barely spoke to her parents those last 2 days. It was easier to avoid them altogether than to endure the endless stream of criticism and unsolicited advice. We both agreed to keep the move quiet until the last moment, knowing that any advance notice would only lead to arguments or guilt. On our last night, we sat in our room surrounded by boxes, barely able to contain our relief. "One more day," I said, and my wife smiled for the first time in what felt like weeks. The morning of our move came quietly. We packed the car early, making as little noise as possible. I carried boxes out while my wife checked to make sure we hadn't left anything behind. Her parents were still asleep, and it felt almost surreal to slip away unnoticed. By the time her mother woke up, we were almost done. She walked into the kitchen, saw the empty shelves in our room, and immediately started asking questions. "What's going on? Are you leaving?" "Yes," my wife replied firmly but politely. "It's time for us to get our own space." Her mother didn't take it well. She launched into a tirade about how we'd taken advantage of her generosity, how ungrateful we were, and how we'd struggle without her guidance. Her father joined in, adding his own passive-aggressive remarks. I didn't engage. We loaded the last of our belongings, thanked them briefly, and drove away. The moment we pulled out of their driveway, I felt like I could finally breathe again. Driving away from her parents' house felt like lifting a heavy weight. For the first time in over a year, we had our own space, our own freedom, and the ability to make decisions without constant judgment. Our new place was small but perfect for us. As we unpacked, the silence felt like a gift. There were no unsolicited comments, no hovering presence, no passive-aggressive remarks, just peace. Her parents called a few times over the next few weeks, mostly her mother trying to guilt us. "You're going to regret not having us there to help you," she said once. But I didn't let her get to me. My wife began to set boundaries with them, something she had never done before, and I could see how much lighter she felt too. Looking back, I don't regret the time we spent there. It taught us resilience and the value of setting boundaries. But one thing is for sure, we will never live with them again. Now, in our own space, we're stronger as a couple and more determined to move forward on our own terms. Sometimes the best lesson comes from knowing what you'll never tolerate again. For us, this was that lesson. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.